Chapter 888. Ning Tianya secretly rolled his eyes and said, "At that time, your big brother Chu Yang said that he needed help. But Xiaowu hasn't reached the martial saint level, and can't help." At that time, his expression was very disappointed, very anxious, very exasperated. Mo Qingwu's little head instantly drooped down dejectedly. "It was only later that I found out that Chu Yang is going to do something big next year," Ning Tianya said emotionally. "But I'm afraid that the older generation won't be able to help. The only ones we can count on are the younger generation. But Xiaowu, you haven't reached the required level yet." Mo Qingwu opened her mouth wide. "I can work hard." "What's the use of working hard?" Ning Tianya almost laughed with relief on the spot. His big hand pinched his own, but hard to stop laughing. He said, "That's the martial saint level. Xiaowu, you're quite uncooperative now. You've even started to slack off in your cultivation." "I definitely won't slack off in the future," Mo Qingwu swore. "Then we can only see the situation. It seems that Chu Yang's matter next year is not far away." "This matter?" Ning Tianya sighed. "I'm afraid you still can't make it in time." "Teacher, is there a quick fix method?" Mo Qingwu was almost crying. How could she not help big brother Chu Yang when he was in trouble? A quick fix method. Ning Tianya was very proud. He thought to himself, Xiaowu was originally very resistant to quick fix methods, and was also very uninterested in heavenly treasures. Now, she's actually begging for quick fix methods herself. Actually, it doesn't matter if you don't go. He still has a few very good-looking girls around him to help him. Ning Tianya said very evilly. How can that be? Mo Qingwu was filled with righteous indignation. She jumped up in exasperation. Those little vixens don't have good intentions. How can they help big brother Chu Yang do anything? I'm his wife. Ning Tianya couldn't catch his breath. Looking at this fierce little girl in front of him, he almost fainted. Such a little girl who was still wet behind the ears, was actually coveting the position of someone else's wife. This made the corners of supremacy Ning's mouth twitch. "I will definitely break through to the martial saint level next year." Mo Qingwu clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. Her entire face was flushed red. "Let's go down the mountain and help big brother Chu Yang. Expel all those shameless vixens from the Chu clan." Ning Tianya's entire body was covered in cold sweat. He had the symptoms of alternating between cold and heat. "Master, you must help me." The little loli's eyes were resolute, and she grabbed Ning Tianya tightly. This little Wuxia, wanting to advance from the 8th stage of the emperor level to the saint level in less than a year. Ning Tianya sucked in a breath of cold air. "It's really not easy. Other people have to cultivate for more than 1,000 years. I don't care." Mo Qingwu resolutely replied. "Master, you can make me reach the 8th grade emperor level in a year. So you can certainly make me reach the saint level. I believe in you, master." Ning Tianya took a deep breath. He felt that he had mobilized a little too much. It had the opposite effect. From nothing to an 8th grade martial emperor in just 1 year. Do you know how much the two of us have sacrificed? All the medicines that were suitable for martial great masters, martial saints, martial kings, martial emperors, both of us have found them for you. We even found heavenly treasures that could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth for you. We also found a jade bed that could gather spiritual energy for you to cultivate on its own. Every day, the two of us would use our Supreme Being's divine consciousness to refine your body so that your spiritual energy could keep up with your soaring cultivation level. We have even dug up the spirit veins of a big clan to find spirit veins for you. From the beginning of your cultivation, all the things you have used are things that can make the entire heavenly layer go crazy. So we have forcibly raised your cultivation to the 8th stage of the emperor level. Now this little girl wants to advance from the 8th stage of the emperor level to the saint level in the shortest time possible. Ning Tianya was somewhat melancholy. "We will do our best." "No, we must do it," Mo Qingwu resolutely said. "Master, I will go and cultivate now." Turning around, the little girl went off to practice martial arts. She had a resolute demeanor and the determination to defend her position as brother Chu Yang's wife to the death. Her footsteps were sonorous and sonorous. Ning Tianya sighed deeply. Finally, I have sent my disciple to cultivate. But how can I cover up this lie when the time comes? Besides, what kind of ability can make his disciple's cultivation and divine sense advance to the saint level in half a year? This is a huge problem. It took me 20 years to advance from the emperor level to the saint level. How can it be so easy? Just as he was thinking, haha lung. Balu Qing floated over and rocked back and forth. Old Ning, you have bragged too much, haven't you? Ning Tianya frowned and said, don't talk. I will think about it carefully. Balu Qing snorted. What are you thinking about? It is not impossible for her to reach the saint level in half a year. If she only improves her cultivation, we can do it with one enlightenment. But she has to rely on herself to comprehend and communicate with the heavenly way. How can it be so easy? He said in a mocking tone. She has no foundation to reach the emperor level. She only needs to comprehend martial arts. This is not a difficult matter. She will follow the path step by step as long as we pave the way. Therefore, it is not difficult. But she needs to comprehend the heavenly way from the 5th grade of the monarch level. Is this something you can help with? You have made such a wish. Let's see how you clean up the mess if you can't fulfill it when the time comes. Ning Tianya frowned and said, didn't I come to discuss with you? Balu Qing angrily said, why should I help you clean up the mess you left behind? Little Wu is our common disciple. Ning Tianya solemnly said, you should put in more than half of your effort. Balu Qing rolled his eyes. Why should I put in more than half? He said, don't talk nonsense. Let's discuss it. Ning Tianya sighed. According to the current normal progress, it will be very good if she can reach the monarch level in half a year if you and I put in more effort. Balu Qing angrily said. Then why did you tell her about the saint level? Ning Tianya drooped his head. I want to set up a long-term target for her. Balu Qing was so angry that he couldn't speak. Long-term target? Great, now both of us have been trapped in a trap. Long-term your head. Half a year. Ning Tianya sighed. Did you get the boneless blood fish? How much did you get? Balu Qing asked. It should be more than 100,000. It was Yiling Xue who got it. It's not much in total. We'll split it in half. He also has a disciple who needs it. Ning Tianya sighed. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Ning Tianya said half instead of 1/3. You're giving him half? Balu Qing couldn't understand. He stared as if he wanted to eat someone. Do you know what kind of person Yiling Xue is? He has a wife called Feng Yuro. Do you know? Do you know what they take in disciples for? You actually gave him half of the boneless blood fish, which can improve one's bone structure. Do you think our disciple is not good enough? You want someone else's disciple to bully her. Half is still more than 100,000. Ning Tianya said with a guilty conscience. You don't know how to do it yourself? You actually want Yiling Xue to do it. Balu Qing stared. Chu Yang was there at that time. Ning Tianya sighed. Guess if I was seen by Chu Yang. Balu Qing replied with an "Oh, that's understandable." Then he asked excitedly, how's that guy now? Ning Tianya rolled his eyes. 4th grade sword sovereign. It looks like he's about to break through to 5th grade. Balu Qing said, that's really not easy. Ning Tianya said with deep emotion, yes. He has no one to rely on, and has worked hard to get to where he is now. It's already a heaven-defying achievement for him to be a 5th grade sword sovereign. Balu Qing nodded and said with some emotion, there are really too few lucky people like Xiaowu and Yiling Xue's brother. 2 supreme martial artists. Indeed, even if it was a direct descendant of a big clan, it was impossible for 2 supreme martial artists to cleanse his meridians every day, let alone a 5th grade supreme martial artist. Mo Qingguo and Wu Qianqian not only had good aptitudes, but also had supreme martial artist masters by their side. They were improving their cultivation every moment, and their spiritual awareness and cultivation were improving together. If they couldn't do it themselves, their masters might as well use the supreme martial artist's divine sense to help them improve. This was equivalent to cheating. How could it not be fast? If they relied on their own efforts, not to mention monarch level or emperor level, it could be said that they had worked very hard to reach king level. That was why the 2 supreme martial artists were so shocked by Chu Yang's mere 4th grade sword sovereign. He doesn't have any flaws now, right? Buluqing said. Back in the northern wastelands, there was still sword energy exposed. Not anymore, Ning Tianya said. Even Yu Lingxue couldn't tell. He just felt that he should be extraordinary. Buluqing laughed mischievously. Only extraordinary achievements? Yu Lingxue is really as silly as his wife. Ning Tianya and Buluqing looked at each other. Both of them winked at each other and laughed. They were secretly pleased. It seemed that Yu Lingxue couldn't tell Chu Yang's identity. This matter in itself was a big humiliation in front of the two of them. It was extremely embarrassing. There are hundreds of thousands of boneless bloodfish. If we consume them normally, it won't be possible. We can increase it every day and refine blood pearls to consume. Buluqing's expression became normal. He said, for the first 3 days, 3 pearls a day. Use 100 fish per pearl to refine the essence and improve the foundation of the disciple. For the second 3 days, still 3 pearls, 200 fish per pearl. For the third 3 days, 400 fish per pearl. Increase it in sequence so that her physique can keep up with the requirements of each level as soon as possible. Even if her cultivation is improved, her physique will still be perfect. Ning Tianya was shocked. Such improvement. You really want little Wu to reach saint level within half a year? That's impossible. Buluqing snorted and ignored him. He continued, so we still need pure yang medicine. And I remember that Chu Yang once gave little Wu Xianyang jade core. Ning Tianya wondered, did he? Then he sighed. Old Bu, we were born at the wrong time. When we were disciples, we were beaten, scolded, and bullied every day. We were always like Sunday. It felt good to be a master, but it's not easy to be a disciple. Now that we've finally become a master, we realize that the world has changed again. It's not easy to be a master. Damn it, we're still like sun in front of our disciples, bullied by them every day. What the hell is this? Chapter 889. Buluqing rolled his eyes and said, our aptitudes can be said to be 1 in 10,000 among ordinary people. But we aren't very outstanding in our respective sections. So what's so strange about getting beaten and scolded? So many senior and junior brothers who were stronger than us have died. And only the 2 of us are still alive. This is already good enough. But you're still in the mood to complain. If that's the case, who should we complain to about the pile of bones underground? Ning Tianya sighed. It's strange. So many people with better aptitudes than us have died. Buluqing snorted and said, people in Jiang who rely on strength and luck. Not aptitude. Aptitude is only one aspect. The key is that you have to pay the price. A natural genius is no better than a pig if he sleeps every day. So what's so strange about him dying? Ning Tianya rejoiced and said, you're right. Fortunately, Xiao Wu works hard. She knows how to endure hardships at such a young age. This is very rare. Having such a disciple, it's also a joy for the family to suffer a little. Buluqing said disdainfully, you're a cheap bone. So don't say anything. Ning Tianya glared at him and said, you're not a cheap bone. You're more patient than me every time you get scolded by your disciple. And you're still smiling and squinting your eyes when she scolds you. Your disciple says that it's not fun if you don't have a beard on your chin. You're more than 10,000 years old, but you still have a beard. You grow a beard for your disciple to play with. Aren't you cheap? But I never complain. Buluqing's face was a little red. He argued, besides, a beard is also a weapon. Your disciple's scolding has increased its flexibility, and it has also trained its attacking power and endurance. Anyway, I'm happy to do so. What can you do about it? Ning Tianya laughed strangely. Buluqing ignored him and said, let's talk about business. Now we have the boneless blood fish and the mysterious yang jade core. So the 2 extremes of yin and yang are enough. Old Ning, you go to the Medicine Valley and get some purple energy cinnabar fruit. Then, go to the Zhuge family and get some Heaven Sun Purple Ganoderma. Then, go to the North Snow Mountain and get some Golden Light Lotus. Then go to the South Sea and get some Purple Whale's Blood Essence. Remember, the more the better. As he spoke, Ning Tianya's expression gradually became interesting. These 4 places were the North, South, East, and West. The Medicine Valley and the Zhuge family were slightly stronger, but the North Snow Mountain and the South Sea were two extremes. Besides, those things were all heavenly treasures. How could they be found immediately after going there? Ning Tianya was flabbergasted. That's easy for you to say. The Medicine Valley, the Zhuge clan, the North Snow Mountain, the Purple Whale Blood. It just so happens that they're all located in the north, south, east, and west, spanning more than 200,000 li. You want me to break my legs just by moving your lips? Why don't you go yourself? Bu Luqing said indifferently. Firstly, it's not my promise to reach saint level in half a year. It's yours. Secondly, if both of us leave, what will happen if something happens here? Thirdly, if you want to go then go. If you don't want to go then forget it. Anyway, when the time comes, my disciple won't look for me to settle the score. Ning Tianya flew into a rage. Half each. No way. Bu Luqing remained unmoved. Ning Tianya stood there pitifully, as if he had lost his soul. It's a pity that I just came back. Oh right. Bu Luqing suddenly clapped his hands and said, I almost forgot. What's the matter? Ning Tianya thought that Bu Luqing wanted to help him, so he asked in high spirits. You also need to get some spirit comprehension grass and heavenly Dao tea. Bu Luqing said. Little Wu is still young after all. No matter how smart she is, it's impossible for her to comprehend the heavenly Dao. As the saying goes, before one reaches adulthood, one's age changes one's mind. She's still young, so what can she comprehend? Therefore, using spirit comprehension grass and heavenly Dao tea is the most effective way to improve her mind. Moreover, little Wu has the red heart now, so taking these will be more effective. You also need to get a few kilograms of each of them. Ning Tianya was completely dumbfounded. Old Bu, don't tell me you don't know. Only the two of us have drunk these two things once in our lives. You actually want me to get a few kilograms? And even conveniently? Then, you can fucking go conveniently. Don't come conveniently. Ning Tianya flew into a hysterical rage. Bu Luqing stood up and stretched. If you can get 4 of these things back in 2 months, I'll think of a way to get the remaining 2. If I can't, then I can't do anything. As he spoke, Bu Luqing walked into his small bamboo house. Ning Tianya's face collapsed like a bitter gourd. Damn Bu Luqing. Mo Qingwu's voice came from the side. Teacher, come quickly. Ning Tianya jumped up immediately. His voice became gentle and kind. He rushed over, but it was already too late. He could only hear Bu Luqing's mushy voice from inside. Good little Wu, what's wrong? Oh, so it's this is the soy sauce drop. Supremacy Ning stared with grief and indignation. He stomped his feet and said as if he was about to cry. I'll go get the medicine. Chu Yang entered the Huang clan castle amidst Huang Gong's chatter. The moment he entered he could feel the tight security. Everywhere was filled with murderous intent. Now was the time of war with the Xiao clan. So the Huang clan naturally went all out. Chu Yang's arrival was welcomed wholeheartedly by the Huang clan. The clan master, Huang Shang, came out personally to welcome him. Behind him, several ancestors of the Huang clan also showed up. That night, the Huang clan held a big banquet to entertain divine Dr. Chu. Huang Shang didn't feel anything different about Wei Wuyan. He only thought that Wei Wuyan was divine Dr. Chu's attendant. Wei Wuyan was happy that no one would disturb him. He actually dutifully played the role of an attendant and stood behind Chu Yang. During this period, there were also a few martial saint experts who looked at Wei Wuyan, but they were far inferior to Wei Wuyan and couldn't see anything. Huang Xiaoyou sat at the same table as Chu Yang and was beaming with joy. He even let his 2 wives come out to toast divine Dr. Chu. Divine Dr. Chu was so embarrassed that he almost hid under the table. The little lowly, Chu Luer, ate to her heart's content. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 types of dishes. At the second table in the hall, a yellow-clothed young man stood up and walked over with a wine cup. He had a smile on his face and was full of pride. Foster father, divine Dr. Chu has cured my brother's illness. I'm very grateful and would like to propose a toast to divine Dr. Chu. Foster father, please allow me. Huang Shang laughed. Good. It's rare for you to be so filial. Huang Xiaoyou's face darkened. Chu Yang looked over and saw that the young man in yellow had muscular arms and a thin waist. He was tall and handsome, and his eyes were full of spirit. He actually had the cultivation of a martial emperor. With a cordial smile, he raised a glass full of wine. Divine Dr. Chu's miraculous hands have saved our Huang clan from future troubles. You're really the great benefactor of our Huang clan. I'm Huang Qing. I'd like to propose a toast to Divine Dr. Chu to express my gratitude. If Divine Dr. Chu has any requests in the future, I, Huang Qing, am willing to do anything for you. As he said, he drank up the cup of wine and laughed. Chu Yang raised his cup. Mr. Huang, you're too polite. He also drank a cup. Huang Qing smiled and said a few more polite words. Then he went back and sat down. As soon as he sat down, the 7 or 8 young men at his table all raised their cups to toast to Chu Yang. After a while, Chu Yang finally finished this round of toasting. Chu Yang looked at Huang Xiaoliu. These people are all my brothers, Huang Xiaoliu said dejectedly. They're all taken in by my father in the past 3 years. Chu Yang was enlightened. I see. Huang Shang must have lost confidence in his son at that time, so he could only use this method. But now that Huang Xiaoliu had recovered and was normal, these people were no longer of much use. At first glance, it didn't seem to be a big deal. But if one thought carefully, one would immediately realize that these 7 or 8 young men and Huang Xiaoliu were now mortal enemies. Since Huang Xiaoliu had recovered, it was useless to keep these people. Instead, they would become internal troubles. Huang Xiaoliu sighed dejectedly. These people were still all right in the past. But now that I've recovered, they're all uncomfortable when they see me. Now I even need 2 martial saints to guard me when I'm having sex. My wife is going to die of embarrassment. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. After dinner, Huang Shang specially invited Chu Yang to his room for a chat. Divine Dr. Chu, you've also seen the banquet just now. I just want to ask Divine Dr. Chu, has my son's illness been completely eradicated? Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, as long as he doesn't overindulge, he should be fine. But we have to guard against the Xiao clan. And the person who can do this should be in the Huang clan. Huang Shang's eyes flashed and he nodded slowly. There are many spies in the Huang clan. His eyes were deep. Obviously, he was already relieved. Chu Yang smiled slightly. On the second day, when Chu Yang just got up, he felt that something was wrong. It seemed that there was dead silence outside the door. But from the breathing, there should be someone outside. When he went out, he saw that the servants of the Huang clan were all huddled at one side, as if they were whispering something. After asking, he knew that the Huang clan was suddenly attacked by the Xiao clan last night. None of the 8 brothers of the Huang clan survived. They all died in this battle. In addition, the Huang clan also lost more than 40 experts, including 3 martial monarchs. Chu Yang's heart shook. This Huang Shang is really vicious and merciless. Moreover, he is swift and decisive. He killed so many people without hesitation just because of my affirmation. Since my son recovered, some people looked a little strange. I've been observing. Yesterday Divine Dr. Chu came. Divine Dr. Chu is the hero who saved the entire Huang clan. Everyone was very enthusiastic. But there were also some people who didn't look right or spoke insincerely. Huang Shang said, so I killed all those people. Although there will definitely be some who escaped. But, as long as we are careful, nothing will happen. Chu Yang agreed, Clan Master Huang is right. But he was a little wary in his heart. What Huang Shang did was completely right. In terms of benefits, it was right to kill these people. But in terms of emotions, it was a little cruel. Just like what Huang Shang said. There will definitely be some who escaped. He was absolutely certain about this. But there was also one thing that couldn't be denied. There will definitely be some innocent people. Chu Yang asked himself, if it were me, would I do this? After thinking for a long time, the answer was, no. Even if I kill people, I will never hurt the innocent. Huang Shang was ruthless and ruthless. He was definitely ambitious and ruthless. Such a person, and such a force couldn't be controlled. Huang Shang looked at Chu Yang and smiled. Divine Dr. Chu, in your opinion, if I let Xiaoyu participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting, what do you think? Can he win a place for the Huang clan? Huang Xiaoyu participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting? Chu Yang was stunned. Only then did he realize that there were 2 more people. Thank you to Long Yinyue. and trouble in the secular world for your rewards. Thank you to Wild Waves, Tears of Fashion, Lilac Fragrance, Heartless Youngster, Awesome Young Master Dong, Traces of Kisses, Shui Linglong, and other brothers for their rewards. There are too many people, so I can't list them one by one. After this month's work, I will list the World Pride Leaderboard and World Pride Monthly Votes Leaderboard, and announce them to all the brothers and sisters who have given rewards and monthly votes. Because of my body's condition, I didn't update much these 2 days. I'm really ashamed. Thank you everyone. It rained for 1 day and 2 nights in Laiwu. My diarrhea also lasted for 1 day and 1 night. I almost didn't sleep last night. On average, I had to jump out of bed in less than 2 hours and run to the toilet at a speed of 100 meters. This is the first update. I'm going to the infusion now. I'll write the second update when I come back at night. Everyone please be considerate. Chapter 890. Why did Huang Shang let Huang Xiaoyu participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting? Wasn't that sending him to his death? Hundreds of miles away from the Huang clan fort. At this time, Wan Renjie and the others had already bid farewell to Chu Yang, and went their separate ways. They promised to meet again, at the medicine banquet of the Zhuge clan next spring. Chu Yang walked for a long time with his head lowered. Then he finally asked this question. Chu Yang really couldn't figure this out no matter how hard he tried. Old Wei, what do you think Huang Shang is thinking? Chu Yang frowned. Why did he let Huang Xiaoyu participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting? Wei Wuyan pondered for a long time and finally sighed. I can't figure it out. Yeah, I can't figure it out either, Chu Yang said. This matter is really puzzling. Chao Wuyan said lightly. If he loves his son dearly, he wouldn't let him go to his death. But with Huang Xiaoyu's cultivation, there's no other way for him to participate in the Tianding Grand Meeting. Chu Yang said. Yes, if he loves his son dearly, he wouldn't let him go to the Tianding Grand Meeting. If he doesn't love his son dearly, he wouldn't have spent more than 1 million purple crystals on his son these few years. The two thought for a long time, but still couldn't figure it out. They couldn't help but sigh. After all, we're not ambitious and ruthless. We don't understand the mindset of an ambitious and ruthless person at all. Chu Luo finally couldn't help but sneer. The two looked at each other in astonishment. Big brother, you're wrong. Chu Luo giggled. Chu Yang said modestly, what's wrong? Wei Wuyan also frowned. Could it be that you, a little girl, actually thought of something that neither of us could think of? Chu Luo laughed for a while and suddenly became dazed for a while, as if she was going to cry. After a long time, she sighed and said, Big brother, although you're from the Chu clan, you didn't grow up in the Chu clan. So, you might understand politics, battles, or conspiracies, but you still don't understand what a clan is. It's the same for Big Brother Wei. So the two of you are only from the martial arts world, and not from the martial arts world. Chu Luo smiled sadly, but there was some mockery in her smile. I'd like to hear the details, Wei Wuyan said humbly. Chu Luo chuckled. Big brother, I'm still young, and all these years other than watching, I've been staying in the family. When I have nothing to do, I've started to analyze the kindness of everyone in the family, from my great-grandfather to the servants in our family. Then, I realized that no matter if you're in a high position or at the bottom of the hierarchy, everyone has their own kindness. No one can say that the other is despicable. Now that second uncle is dead, it's a little disrespectful to talk about it. But at that time, why was second uncle so unbridled? This was because his eldest uncle's son was missing. Whatever he did, it was the right thing to do. Because he had a son, a direct descendant. My father and fourth uncle couldn't compare to second uncle in terms of status. So second uncle continued to live like this. First uncle must know about what he did, and auntie must be suspicious. Grandfather must know more or less about it. Even my father and fourth uncle must have heard about it through groundless rumors. But no one, including eldest uncle, said anything. Why? Because the most important thing in the family is never kinship. Chu Luo smiled sadly. Perhaps in the family, our mothers put their children first. But mothers are weak in the family after all. What they say doesn't count. In the family, the most important thing is the inheritance, bloodline. The second thing to look at is the future, the family's future. It's not a person's personal future. Chu Luer's face was young and tender, but the words she said were so heavy that it made one unable to breathe. Wei Wuyan also looked at her in surprise. If these principles came out of the mouth of any adult, it would make one astonished at his talent and comprehension, let alone a little girl who said these words. So, the family tacitly allowed second uncle's family to be dominant. Even the servants and retainers were completely loyal to the Chu family. We definitely couldn't doubt this. But their loyalty was to the Chu family, not to the master of the Chu family. When the family was gone, they were also finished. But when the master of the family changed, they were still around. Second uncle had the ability and the means back then. Everyone thought that second uncle could bring the Chu family to a higher position. So they supported second uncle. Everyone knew that eldest uncle was a good person. But they couldn't stand on the side of a good person. Because good people are often the ones who are sacrificed. Chu Yang nodded silently. So big brother, although you have left the family now, when you return, you will realize that those who were originally loyal to second uncle are now even more loyal to you. And this loyalty is sincere. Don't doubt this sincerity. And these people, you can deal with them however you want. No matter how badly you deal with them, they will gladly endure it. As long as they can keep their status and lives. Chu Luer smiled. This is the family. Chu Yang nodded silently again. He couldn't help but admit that his sister's view was extremely reasonable. What she said was from the coldest point of view. But the principles she said couldn't be refuted by anyone. Looking at Chu Luer, Chu Yang suddenly thought of a person. That person who specialized in scheming and plotting from the dark side of human nature, but was always successful. The master of calculation and manipulation, Mo Tianji. At this moment, Chu Yang suddenly realized that Chu Luer and Mo Tianji were actually very similar. Especially scheming and plotting. Wei Wuyan was confused. He said, "We're talking about the Huang family. Why are you talking about the Chu family?" Chu Luer smiled reproachfully. So big brother Wei, you're not a person in power, but a very cute person. Chu Yang smiled. He knew that Chu Luer was praising Wei Wuyan on the surface, but in fact, she was saying that Wei Wuyan wasn't scheming and could only be used by others. He was a typical type of person. Wei Wuyan wasn't stupid. The corner of his mouth twitched. He glared at Chu Luer and said, "You can just say that I'm not enlightened." Chu Luer giggled and said, "The Huang family's matter is similar to the Chu family's matter. Clan Master Huang doesn't value his son, Huang Xiaoliu, but because he only has one son. No matter what, he wants this inheritance. So no matter what price he has to pay, he wants a direct descendant of the Huang family. As for Huang Xiaoliu, he's a playboy with a true temperament. This kind of person won't achieve much in his lifetime. To be honest, with Clan Master Huang Shang's cultivation, Huang Xiaoliu might have died of old age in a few decades when he's still in his prime. As long as the Huang clan still exists, this kind of thing where the white-haired person dies before the black-haired person will definitely happen. But if Huang Xiaoliu dies in the Tianding Grand Meeting, it'll definitely be different," Chu Luer said affirmatively. Her eyes were full of helpless pity. "I see." Chu Yang was enlightened, but he still let Chu Luer continue. However, the more Chu Luer said, the more disappointed Chu Yang was. He felt that this world was actually so ugly. Chu Luer continued, "Huang Xiaoliu dies in the Tianding Grand Meeting. What kind of place is the Tianding Grand Meeting? It selects law enforcement officers and determines the status of clans. Now that Huang Xiaoliu has died, he's only left behind 2 crying babies. In the future, we'll teach them. What kind of sacrifice did your father make for our clan? Don't neglect this small matter. For children who haven't formed their minds yet, they'll be instilled with how great their father is. Then they'll work hard to cultivate until they're independent. And by then, the Huang family will be stronger than it is now, sacrificing Huang Xiaoliu, who has no future at all, in exchange for the prosperity of the Huang family." Chu Luer said, "It's not that Huang Shang doesn't have any affection for his son, but compared to the long-term interests of the clan, this affection is too weak. Anyway, Huang Xiaoliu can't play any big role in his current situation. His only role in this life is to set a great example for the future generations of the clan. Too cold, Chu Yang said solemnly. Wei Wuyan nodded in agreement. It's indeed too cold. I hope I'm wrong, Chu Luer sighed softly. You only said to leave behind 2 babies. But didn't you think about what if these 2 babies are girls? Wei Wuyan asked. So, Huang Shang chose the Tianding Grand Meeting instead of the medicine banquet for Huang Xiaoliu. Chu Luer sneered and said, There's still 1.5 years to the Tianding Grand Meeting, and it only takes 10 months for a girl to get pregnant. Wei Wuyan felt cold all over. He asked Chu Yang, This is a clan? Chu Yang sighed. After careful consideration, he said, Although I don't want to admit it, I have to say that 80% of Luer's speculation should be close to the truth. Wei Wuyan was stunned for a long time. Then he let out a sigh and said, Fortunately, I wasn't born in a clan. Chu Luer and Chu Yang remained silent. Huang Xiaoliu's resigned, helpless and bitter eyes flashed in front of Chu Yang's eyes. He seemed to see Huang Xiaoliu saying to himself, Boss, I'm actually just a dandy. My only mission is to carry on the Huang family's ancestral line. When I return home, I'll work hard to be a good tool. Suddenly, he felt extremely resentful. He's already resigned to his fate. He already wants to do everything according to your arrangements. Why do you still want to do this? Using his life to squeeze out the greatest value from him before and after his death? Is this still the relationship between parents and children? Huang Shang, why are you so cruel? You're so ambitious. Even if the Huang family dominates the heavens, what can you get from it? But Chu Yang only kept these in his heart. His current strength was not enough. He couldn't intervene in the disputes of such a big clan like the Huang family. Chu Yang only thought of that dandy's face, that tone of resignation, and that expression of despair. He sighed deeply in his heart. If we meet at the Tianding Grand Meeting in the future, can I lend him a hand? The 3 of them walked on. Chu Yang was very silent all the way. After walking for a few hundred miles when they were camping at night, Chu Yang suddenly asked Chu Luer, Sister Luer, what about you? What do you think of your future? Because at this moment, he suddenly thought of Yu Lingxua's words. If you really love and care for her, give her a future. Let her be all-powerful, and look down on the world. Don't use your identity and love to bind her to an ordinary woman. Second update today. Chu Luer's future has troubled me for a long time. If anyone has any thoughts, you can share them in the comments section. Cousin went with me to Yin Tian's infusion. Cousin said that the money for the injection could be exchanged for 10 yuan. Why did you still have diarrhea? I was speechless on the spot. Damn it, if all the money was exchanged for 1-cent coins, I would die on the spot. Chapter 891. Future. Chu Luer looked at Chu Yang in confusion. Her expression also gradually became serious. Ever since she returned home, Chu Yang had never called her sister Luer. He always called her Luer. At this moment, when he called her Luer, Chu Luer felt a sense of solemnity, holiness and respect. Not bad, future. Chu Yang nodded heavily. Wei Wuyan stood up and smiled. I'll go hunt some wild animals to go with the wine. His figure flashed and disappeared without a trace. He could tell that Chu Yang and his sister were discussing some serious issues. And Wei Wuyan felt that he shouldn't listen to this issue, so he simply avoided it. The siblings who were deep in thought didn't notice Wei Wuyan's departure. Under the flickering bonfire, the siblings' expressions were a little serious. Chu Luer's expression was a little sad. Big brother, are you already planning for my future now? Chu Yang nodded and said affirmatively. Luer needs to be in charge of her own future. Chu Luer smiled and said, But big brother, I only have 2 years. And, we haven't found the 8 kinds of magical herbs that you mentioned. It's a little too early for me to worry about my future now. Chu Yang smiled. Under the bonfire, Chu Yang's smile was serious and solemn, full of trustworthiness. He said, Luer, you only need 1 or 2 kinds of herbs now. Ah. Chu Luer stood up in shock. She looked at Chu Yang and her whole body trembled. Big brother, this. Why? You don't believe me? Chu Yang smiled and took out a small package. Luer, this is the absolute vine that third uncle risked his life to get back. Chu Luer looked at it dumbfounded. Chu Yang took out the packages one by one. This is jade petal ganoderma. This is heavenly jade mystical liquid. This is a flower. This is life pangolin. This is lifeless death water. This is earth-ean soul ginseng. Chu Yang laid them out in a row. Luer, there are a total of 8 kinds of magical herbs. We already have 7 kinds here. Now all that's left is the color lotus. Chu Luer's delicate body began to tremble like a willow in the wind. Her lips turned pale, and she was on the verge of collapsing. She felt her legs go weak, and she almost couldn't stand straight. She couldn't form a sound. Big brother. You, how did you find me? Chu Yang chuckled and said, Big brother, you're not called the black-hearted divine hand for nothing. He said, these medicines have been made using some methods. Perhaps they're somewhat shady, but in the end he got it. Furthermore, there's only one thing missing. Tears blurred Chu Luer's eyes. Big brother. Chu Yang's face became extremely serious. Luer, I'm only telling you this today, because I want you to know that your future is not limited to just these 2 years. You still have 100 years, 1,000 years, and 10,000 years ahead of you. As long as you are willing, your future is limitless. My future is limitless. Chu Luer's tears dripped down. She said in a daze, so, I don't only have these 2 years left. Chu Yang smiled. Good sister, you still have a very long life ahead of you. Therefore, we have to plan what you want to do in that long life of yours. Chu Luer was at a loss. Her body swayed and she almost fell down. The huge surprise, the long-awaited wish, was suddenly right in front of her eyes. She couldn't bear it at all. These days, she knew that her 4th uncle, Chu Fian, had been going to the law enforcement blood payers hall every day to inquire for information. She also heard faintly that out of the medicinal herbs that Huang Gong needed, how many of them were needed by her. But she never had any extravagant hopes, nor did she complain about anything. To this pitiful girl, to be able to live the remaining 2 years of her life without suffering was already an extravagant wish that she didn't even dare to think about. Chu Luer was already grateful that her big brother could let her live without suffering for 2 years. But she didn't expect that her big brother had actually gotten 7 of the 8 medicinal herbs that she needed unknowingly. It was said that the Chu clan couldn't afford those even if they sold all their fortune. For a moment, Chu Luer felt as if she was in a dream. Her body was floating and weightless. Chu Yang sighed tenderly. He pulled Chu Luer's petite body over and hugged her in his arms. He let her sit on his lap, and gently stroked his sister's hair with his right hand, to wake her up as soon as possible. After a long time, Chu Luer seemed to have woken up from a dream. She didn't say a word. Suddenly, she leaned into Chu Yang's arms and started sobbing silently. Her sobbing went from silent sobbing to soft choking, and then to loud bawling. Her voice was sharp and miserable. And there was also a kind of relief that she finally felt relieved. I finally escaped from the shadow of death. I can live on. Chu Luer cried until she almost couldn't breathe. She was like a little girl who had been wronged infinitely, and had finally thrown herself into the warm embrace of her family. Chu Yang hugged her quietly and patted her gently, letting Chu Luer continue to cry. He knew that the pain and despair that Chu Luer had been suppressing in her heart for a long time was slowly being released and dissipating. After a long time. Big brother. I didn't say it before, but I'm very scared. Chu Luer sobbed and said. I'm very scared of death. Chu Yang's heart tightened. This sentence seemed to have squeezed his heart. Death, who wasn't afraid of death? Even an old monster who had lived for thousands of years would be afraid of death, let alone a little girl like Chu Lu, or who hadn't even started her life yet. If life was like a flower, Chu Luer was just a flower that had just sprouted. I'm scared that I won't be able to see all of you anymore. I won't be able to see Mother anymore. I'm scared. I heard that the world is completely dark, and you can't see anything. There's no light, nothing at all. You can only walk alone. Chu Luer cried and her body trembled. Big brother. Every time I think of that kind of loneliness, I try my best to live on. I'm too scared. Too scared. There were a few times when I dreamed of it, and it scared me awake. I didn't dare to sleep anymore. I'm really scared. Now, you don't have to be scared of anything. Chu Yang's voice was full of confidence, and full of Chu Luer's complete dependence. This made her hug her big brother's arm even tighter. Luer, do you know who's in charge of that world? Chu Yang asked gently. Chu Luer's body trembled violently. She hid her little head in Chu Yang's arms and said softly, I heard that. He's called the King of Hell. Yes. Do you know what my nickname was before I came to the upper three heavens? Chu Yang's voice was suddenly full of dominance and arrogance, as if he was the ruler of the world. Big Brother's nickname? Chu Luer raised her head curiously and said, I don't know. For some reason, Chu Luer was instantly affected by Chu Yang's wild and domineering aura that ignored the world. The fear in her heart suddenly disappeared without a trace in her big brother's arms. She only felt incomparably warm and comfortable. At that time, they all called Big Brother King of Hell Chu. Chu Yang laughed. His laughter was full of incomparable confidence. Ah, so impressive. Chu Luer blinked. In Chu Yang's gentle and firm voice, Chu Luer actually didn't realize that she had already stopped crying. Yes, so I'm the King of Hell. Chu Yang laughed. Chu Luer pressed her face against her big brother's chest and felt the strong and powerful beating of his heart in his chest. Suddenly, she felt peace and happiness in her heart. In this embrace, she didn't have to be afraid of anything and didn't have to worry about anything. And this embrace was always open to her and would never cool down. Yes, Big Brother is the King of Hell, Chu Luer said softly and affirmatively, full of trust. When she said the two terrifying words King of Hell, she felt that she was no longer afraid. Yes, so I want you to remember it well, Chu Yang said word by word. I'm the King of Hell. If the King of Hell doesn't want you to die, then you won't die no matter what. At this moment, Chu Yang's voice became resolute, like the sound of metal clashing, sonorous and powerful. These few words were full of trustworthy power, as if they were directly imprinted on Chu Luer's mind and turned into a brand that could never be erased. When Chu Yang said this, he used the unparalleled power of his spirit. Chu Luer nodded heavily. Big Brother, I believe you. At this moment, she really believed it and believed wholeheartedly. As long as Big Brother doesn't want me to die, then I won't die. And Big Brother will definitely not let me die. Since that's the case, what do I have to be afraid of? Now, do you have confidence in your future? Chu Yang smiled and asked as he pinched Chu Luer's little nose. Oh my Big Brother, you're so annoying. Chu Luer smiled shyly and nudged her little head in Chu Yang's arms. Tell me, what do you want to be when you grow up? Chu Yang said softly. When I grow up. Chu Luer snuggled in Chu Yang's arms and blinked her big eyes. When I grow up. She suddenly pursed her lips. There are a few choices. Chu Yang looked at the flickering fire and threw in another bundle of firewood. Amidst the crackling sounds, a pine fragrance with smoke wafted out, and the fire burned even brighter. The first choice is to be ordinary. Be an ordinary woman and grow up happily. Don't care about the responsibilities of the clan or the people of the world. Just find a reliable person and support each other in times of need. Assist the husband and teach him. And live through this life. Ordinary and vulgar but real. Although life is short, you'll enjoy family ties. From young to old, after seeing all the vanity of the world, you'll leave quietly. Chu Yang's voice was heavy as he said, This is a path. Chu Luer straightened her body from Chu Yang's arms. She brushed her hair and smiled. Then what's the second choice? Chu Yang looked at Chu Luer's face steadily. After a long time he said, The second choice is to choose the path of power. You'll use all your wisdom and schemes, and use your clan as a platform to seek benefits for the clan. You'll command thousands of troops step by step, and you'll have complete power and authority for the rest of your life. Chu Luer smiled. The third choice. Chapter 892. Chu Yang took a deep breath. The third way is to choose the path of martial arts and devote one's life to arduous cultivation. To prolong one's life will be colorful but also lonely. It will be full of perilous situations and full of life and death. It's not certain when it will stop. Chu Luer was silent for a while before she asked, Big Brother, is there a fourth way? The fourth way? Chu Yang took a breath. Yes, the fourth way of life is the path of the great Tao. Chu Yang swallowed his saliva and said with some difficulty, The path of the great Tao is beyond the path of martial arts, and the path of the heavenly Tao. The path of the great Tao has no end. If you want to walk on the path of the great Tao, you have to pay not only with hard work and sweat, but also with a firm belief. This path is the most difficult one, and also the loneliest. When you walk halfway, you may find that the people around you have already fallen and disappeared. But you can't turn back. You can only keep walking forward, even if there is nothing in front of you. Chu Yang said in a low voice. Is there really nothing in front of me? Chu Luo bit her little finger and asked softly with the infatuation of a young girl. Maybe there will be something, but everything in front will sooner or later become the scenery behind you. Chu Yang finished speaking in a low voice. He looked at the burning bonfire in a daze and said nothing. Chu Luo took 2 steps outside and looked at the dark sky and the dark forest. She stood beside the bonfire and said softly, Big brother, you know me too. I've been suffering since I was born. I grew up in pain. Other people may not be able to experience pain in 10 generations, but I can experience it several times in a month. Chu Luo smiled bitterly. Most women in the world will choose the first way, to be a good wife, find a home, and live the rest of their lives. But I've suffered so much in my life and suffered so much pain. But it's not to be a good wife, but to take the most ordinary path. Chu Yang said in a low voice. Then the first way is no. No. The second way is the path of power. I don't want to participate in the struggles of the clan. No matter what, we're still blood related. Just thinking about that kind of situation makes me feel scared. Chu Luo said calmly. Chu Yang sighed. In that case, the second option is also off the table. No. The third path, the path of martial arts. Chu Luo smiled sweetly. Big brother, since there's a path that transcends the path of martial arts, why should I choose this path that's obviously 1 level lower? Chu Yang said helplessly. The third option is also rejected. No. Chu Luo smiled mischievously. Then there's only the fourth option left, Chu Yang said. So I don't need to choose. Chu Luo laughed. The fourth path is filled with hardships. It's the loneliest and the loneliest path, but there will always be people who take it. Although the front will become the back, the scenery is still the scenery. The unknown scenery is the most attractive, because I never know what I will encounter in the next moment. Who knows if there are any companions in front of me? The path of the great Tao. Since they had walked on this path, which one of them wasn't outstanding? All the geniuses and eternal legends since ancient times are on this path. Chu Luo said softly. If I speed up and take a few more steps, I might surpass a legend. Every time I surpass a legend, it's an achievement. Chu Luo's eyes shone brightly. Big brother, I like this kind of achievement. Her face seemed to be glowing under the light of the fire. Chu Yang let out a long sigh. It seemed as if all the feelings and concerns in his chest had been released in this sigh. Good. Chu Yang shouted. Then he stood up. Since that's the case, and Luo has identified your path, I only want to say one thing. Don't regret it in the future. Chu Luo said firmly. I won't regret it. She raised her small chin, which was sharp and carried a kind of determination. Because this is my own path. If I regret it, no one will regret it for me. Chu Yang looked at her quietly for a while and said, I still have 3 paths here. 3 more paths? Chu Luo turned her head in surprise. 3 paths of the great Tao, said Chu Yang. Big brother, please tell me, said Chu Luo. I will choose carefully and carefully. Chu Yang took 2 steps slowly and said, The first path is a kind of martial technique that follows the rules and has the least number of forks. As long as you persevere, you will be able to keep moving forward. This is also the path that most people in the current world have chosen. The second path. Chu Luo frowned. The second path is to take a shortcut. I know of a martial technique that follows the path of pure yin in the female body. Then one can take elixirs of the heavens and the earth and continuously improve. After improving to a certain level, one can start to return to the right path and move forward step by step. This path is also the path of the great Tao, said Chu Yang. Chu Luo frowned again. Big brother, what you mean is that the second path is only different at the beginning, but after a period of time, one will return to the first path. Yes. Chu Yang looked at her steadily. This is also the fastest and most reliable method for female cultivation. What about the third path? Chu Luer asked softly. I hope that you will choose from the first two paths. Chu Yang opened his mouth but still said it. But, big brother, your sister isn't an ordinary girl. Chu Luer smiled gently, but there was a stubborn persistence in her tone. Shameless, Chu Yang chided with a smile, but he hesitated. Big brother, Chu Luer urged. The third path is an evil path. Chu Yang was a little reluctant, but still told her the truth. Your body has been through all kinds of torture, and coupled with the innate poison, it is already different from ordinary people. Once cured, you will have an innate poison spirit body. Innate poison spirit body, Chu Luer blinked. That means that I can cultivate poison techniques faster. That's right, Chu Yang said. I have the poison scripture here. However, this martial technique is a hindrance to a female's reputation. So I don't want you to cultivate poison techniques. Chu Yang sighed deeply. If you choose the first two paths, I will completely change your poison spirit body when I treat you, and let you have a mysterious Yin body. Your progress will not be slower than that of a poison spirit body. Chu Luer thought for a while and said, since the poison spirit body is a gift from the heavens, how can it be changed so easily? Besides, I have suffered for so many years before I finally saw a glimmer of hope. Once my body is changed, won't all the hardships I have suffered since I was born be in vain? Won't all my previous efforts be wasted? Chu Yang reached out and held Chu Luer's hands. He looked deeply into her eyes. Luer, you are my sister. I hope that you will live a happy life. Even if you walk the path of the great Tao, I hope that you will have someone to accompany you, love you and cherish you. After all, I am just a big brother. I can't accompany you for your whole life. And, once you cultivate poison techniques, your reputation will be damaged, and it will have an indelible impact on a woman's reputation. Who in the world would be willing to marry a woman who is full of poison? This matter has to be considered. What I mean is, you can walk the path of the great Tao, and also enjoy the pleasures of the world. It is the best of both worlds. Do you understand what I mean? Chu Luer hugged him and said softly, Big brother, I understand. But if there is really such a person in the future, that person only cares about being orthodox, but can't accept my poison techniques. Such a narrow-minded person, even if I don't cultivate poison techniques, will you be at ease if I entrust my life to such a narrow-minded person? Chu Yang was shocked. Good. Luer, when your body recovers, I will teach you poison techniques. Chu Luer was overjoyed. She hugged his neck and kissed his face fiercely. Big brother is a good person, she thought. Big brother, since I have the poison spirit body, how can I not cultivate poison techniques? Besides, I started so late. If I cultivate according to the rules, when will I be able to help you? Only poison techniques, even if my cultivation is low, can be a powerful deterrent at certain times. After I cultivate poison techniques, you won't have to work so hard to take care of me. Chu Yang felt the soft touch of Chu Luer's lips on his face, and couldn't help but feel happy. He thought, at the end of the day, I still have too many concerns. I am the Tribulation Sword Master and need strong support by my side. If Luer cultivates poison techniques, she will definitely be a great help to me in the future. But I am worried about my reputation. I am worried that people will accuse me of making use of my sister to achieve my hegemony, and even make use of her to cultivate a poison spirit body. I am thinking too much. As long as I have a clear conscience, what does it matter if Luer cultivates poison techniques or not? What does what others say have to do with me? The great Tao is boundless. The so-called poison techniques are just another path to take. Thinking of this, he calmed down immediately. Once his thoughts were clear, he actually felt that his state of mind was a little unstable. Vaguely, there seemed to be signs of a bottleneck loosening. He suddenly understood. Actually, having a clear mind is also a way to cultivate swordsmanship. There is nothing that is stagnant. The sword will naturally reach everywhere. Chu Yang chuckled. He stretched out his hand, and the 7 types of elixirs on the ground entered the tribulation space. He stood next to the fire and suddenly, crisscrossing sword aura covered his body. The sword aura moved left and right, up and down, fluttering chaotically. Wei Wuyan, who had been far away, felt something and hurried over. He couldn't help but be shocked. He saw that the sword aura on Chu Yang's body was crisscrossing, and a faint dense aura spread out. The sword aura whooshed out, but it seemed to be controlled by an invisible hand. It wandered around but didn't hurt anything. Finally, all the sword aura suddenly soared into the sky and formed a slender long sword shape above Chu Yang's head. A clear sword sound was emitted from this invisible sword aura, like the cry of a phoenix in the sky. The sword aura disappeared and entered Chu Yang's body. Wei Wuyan clearly felt that Chu Yang's sword sovereign level had increased by another level at this moment, because his whole person's spirit was completely different from before. It was sharper and more unscrupulous. Originally, the sword was in the scabbard, but now, it was half a foot out of the scabbard, revealing its sharpness. Chapter 893. Wei Wuyan was extremely puzzled. Could it be that talking to my sister can force a breakthrough in cultivation? What kind of explanation is this? It's a pity that my sister has passed away for so many years. Otherwise, I would also like to talk to her. Otherwise, how can Chu Yang's breakthrough be explained? It's simply unbelievable. That night, the three of them said that they stayed for a night, but actually none of them slept. Wei Wuyan was surprised. He was thinking carefully about what was going on. Could this be another kind of epiphany during cultivation? Using kinship for epiphany? Or, using blood relations for epiphany? Great blood payer Wei Wuyan thought until the latter half of the night. The more he thought, the more ridiculous, and the more upset he became. He only felt dizzy and gave up. Chu Luer was thinking, my illness is going to be cured soon. So many years of suffering have finally come to an end. Big brother is going to teach me the art of poison. When I've mastered it, I'll stand out and shout, I'm Chu Luer. I'm Chu Luer. Presumably many people would exclaim on the spot, and then kowtow. Wow, you're the world's #1 poison expert, super expert. As Chu Luer thought, her two big eyes narrowed into crescents. Her rosy lips couldn't help but twitch, and then twitch again. Her small tongue also couldn't help but lick her lips from time to time. She was excited, happy, and exhilarated about the beautiful future she had outlined. But she couldn't sleep. Chu Yang, on the other hand, was wholeheartedly comprehending his new realm, 5th stage sword sovereign. Wei Wuyan's feeling wasn't wrong. In terms of sword cultivation, the 5th stage sword sovereign was the stage of sword cultivation. It was called unsheathing the sword. Unsheathing the sword but not leaving the sheath. Radiating sharpness and threatening murderous intent. Having just obtained the essence of the sword spirit, one could control the spirit of the sword. This was the 5th stage sword sovereign. They set off at dawn the next day. Chu Yang and Wei Wuyan didn't feel anything. Only the little girl Chu Luer had 2 panda-like dark circles under her eyes. She kept yawning along the way. That morning, they had already reached the Black Mountain Pass. The Black Mountain Pass was the boundary of the world. It was also the most terrifying area in the whole southeast region. After crossing this Black Mountain Pass, we'll really be out of the southeast region. Wei Wuyan stretched out his hand and pointed forward, his voice solemn. Chu Yang looked at the triangular intersection in front of him. He let out a deep breath and said, Our Chu clan is not too remote in the southeast. There is a large area in the southeast of the Chu clan. Further southeast is a desolate and uninhabited place. Now that I think about it, we actually walked nearly 7,000 miles from the Chu clan to the Black Mountain Pass. In other words, the entire southeast was actually more than 20,000 miles in a straight line. What a vast place this is, Wei Wuyan said faintly. And the southeast that you see is not even 1/10 of the entire upper 3 heavens. If it was from the southeast to the southwest, it would probably be 100,000 li. And from the south to the north, it's even farther. Chu Yang gasped. The upper 3 heavens is too big. Compared to the lower 3 heavens, and the upper 3 heavens, it's many times bigger. Wei Wuyan chuckled. It's good that the place is big. Heroes were emerging in large numbers, and it was very lively. If he caused trouble, it would be easier for him to hide. That's why the remuneration is so high. Chu Yang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You're only thinking about the remuneration, Wei Wuyan said. But the emergence of the Blood Payers organization has indeed made the upper 3 heavens much quieter. Otherwise, I really don't know how many bandits will appear. Chu Yang said quietly, I don't think so. The emergence of the bloodpayers has made the world more chaotic. Bandits and bloodpayers are mixed together. If they accept missions, they're bloodpayers. If they don't accept missions, they're bandits. In this way, it's even more difficult for the law enforcement officers. Bloodpayers are actually law enforcement officers in another sense. They're the kind of people that the law enforcement officers can't deal with easily. And now that they're mixed together, I'm afraid that the law enforcement officers sometimes don't know where to start. Although there are certain benefits, from a certain extent, this is condoning evil. Wei Wuyan was stunned. After a long time he nodded and said, this makes sense. However, it's also a little one-sided. Chu Yang, do you think that law enforcement officers really enforce the law fairly? There are more than 10 people who wear law enforcement officers' uniforms and commit crimes in this world. Such people are far more abominable than real bandits. Law enforcement officers have long been rotten from the inside. Law enforcement officers have long been rotten from the inside. Chu Yang said softly. His eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking about. So this world is becoming more and more chaotic, Wei Wuyan said. So no matter what, this world is chaotic, Chu Yang said quietly. It's precisely because the world is chaotic that we need to have strength. Wei Wuyan's ordinary face had a kind of clear radiance. Chu Yang, in the upper three heavens, there are many martial artists. There are more experts. And there are more geniuses than experts. Every moment there are geniuses falling. Chu Yang listened quietly. He knew that this was Wei Wuyan's lament. And the lament of people like Wei Wuyan was often the most valuable experience in the martial world. The big clans monopolize all resources. So the world is dominated by the big clans. But no matter when, as long as the big clans exist, there will definitely be resistance. Because of the resistance, the big clans become more and more domineering. So there are more and more people who resist. But big clans are big clans. They have a deep foundation, and they have many talented people. There was a period of time when they even monopolized the word. The Xiao clan established the Frightening Dragon Martial Arts Academy and recruited poor disciples. But after they finished their studies, they all became the Xiao clan's slaves. Those from the Frightening Dragon Martial Arts Academy became hired thugs. And those from the Frightening Dragon Martial Arts Academy became accountants, shopkeepers, and waiters. It's impossible for them to be above the Xiao clan's relatives in their whole lives. The other big clans also used the same method to recruit talents. Outside, there are many people who practice martial arts but are illiterate, Wei Wuyan sighed. What does martial arts comprehension rely on? Even if you're smart and a genius, if you're illiterate and don't know any principles, how can you comprehend the heavenly way of martial arts? That's simply a joke. So, the rule of the big clans is still considered impregnable for the past 10,000 years. Although the big clans are strong, the upper three heavens is too big. After all, there are only a small number of people in the big clans. Although they can rule slowly, they can't monopolize it completely. So from 8,000 years ago there were constant battles and fights. Now, actually every year that passes, the battles will escalate and become more and more intense. But the big clans can completely suppress them every time. But with the passage of time, there are also experts in gangs among the idle people of the martial world. So the whole continent is in chaos. We're that group of people. Wei Wuyan said. The reason why we're able to pass down our heritage, develop our cultivation and still survive, is not because the big clans are soft-hearted, but because what you said just now, the upper three heavens is too big. Chu Yang was silent. Wei Wuyan said, do you know that the sentence the upper three heavens is too big, that you said just now is really enough for people to experience for thousands of years? It's full of helplessness and blood. Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, even if we're helpless, we still have to continue living. Wei Wuyan smiled bitterly. You're right. He said sadly. Now the upper three heavens is desperate for resources. There's no such thing as benevolence, righteousness, and morality. Everything depends on strength. And as long as we pass through this mountain pass, we'll enter a chaotic world. A truly terrifying chaotic world. Chaotic world? Chu Yang frowned and asked. Yes, chaotic world. Ahead is the Black Blood Forest in the southeast. Wei Wuyan pointed and said. Outside the mountain pass, the Black Blood Forest is all within a radius of more than 3,000 miles. It's an unregulated area. Chu Yang sucked in a breath of air. A radius of 3,000 miles. 3,000 miles doesn't seem to be very big, but it's clear after careful calculation. In our words, it's 1.77 million square kilometers. P.S. Some readers always feel that the world is small, so I'll explain it here. This place is equivalent to 1/5 of a country. It's not small. What a vast area this is. This place is bordered by a few big clans, but each clan doesn't dare to have the final say. They also don't dare to go deep into the Black Blood Forest. This place is known as the Forbidden Area of the Southeast Law Enforcement Officers. In this area, the Xiao clan is in contact with the southeast, the Zhuge clan and the Long clan are in contact with the south, and the Yi clan is in contact with the south. It's precisely because these four clans are in contact with each other that they don't care. This place has become a complete chaotic world. In this area, who knows how many bandits, robbers, and all kinds of shady businesses exist. And among these, no one can tell which one belongs to the Xiao clan, the Zhuge clan, the Long clan, or the Yi clan. Wei Wuyan said. So before entering this place, you have to be mentally prepared. He said heavily. Be prepared to kill any time. Or be killed. In such a place, even big clans and law enforcement officers don't have much face. Chu Yang's eyes revealed a sharp light. So I can kill people here as I wish? Yes, as long as you have the ability. Wei Wuyan said. But you have to take note that the people here are the hardest to kill. Because you don't know that a person you kill casually may have a huge force behind him. So, once you kill someone here, you have to kill them cleanly. Otherwise, you'd rather not kill them. Let them go and wait for the next chance. And there are many experts here. As far as I know, there are many leaders whose cultivations are not inferior to mine. And in this entire Black Blood Forest, there's also a person who is known as the Absolute King. This person occupies the entire Black Blood Forest, and is mysterious and unpredictable. For so many years, no one knows his identity, but we only know that he's extremely powerful. Wei Wuyan's voice was very cautious and serious. There was even a strong sense of fear. Chapter 894. I see. Chu Yang nodded as he pondered. He secretly remembered this matter. How could Wei Wuyan be so fearful without even meeting him be a small matter? After thinking for a while, Chu Yang said, Old Wei, I remember that your nest is also here. Wei Wuyan smiled bitterly. Yes, I've placed my teacher on one of the mountains here. In order to avoid trouble, I've been coming and going quietly. I've never come into contact with the people here. They don't know who I am, and I'm also not interested in knowing who they are. Chu Yang nodded slowly and said, If there's any change or danger, take good care of Lu. Don't worry about me. Wei Wuyan nodded. Don't worry. If that mysterious king doesn't appear, I'm confident that I can protect all of you and get out of here. Chu Yang frowned and said, Old Wei, don't fight unless there's no other choice. Let me get a feel of the situation first. Wei Wuyan was startled. Then he understood immediately and said, You want to train yourself. This is a suitable place. Don't worry about anything. Kill as much as you can. This place was the most natural training ground for life and death, because there were all kinds of opponents in the Black Blood Forest. There were all kinds of strange weapons, strange cultivation techniques, and even many cultivation techniques that had been lost in history. However, they would suddenly appear here. Moreover, everyone fights with life and death as the result. It's incomparably powerful in terms of battle experience and tempering of the divine spirit. Chu Yang nodded. He completely understood what Wei Wuyan said. Battle experience was, in fact, only useful in terms of life and death experience. Ordinary daily sparring could only be said to be training the body, nothing more. If one couldn't even feel the killing intent, what was the point of training? As for tempering the divine spirit, it was even more reasonable. After all, this was the other party's home ground. If one fought here, one would have to be tense at all times. He didn't dare to relax at all. Over time, it would be of great benefit to his mental endurance and the condensation of his divine spirit. Ever since Chu Yang got the first fragment of the Tribulation Sword's master's divine spirit, although he had completely digested it, he was still a long way away from condensing it and completely integrating it with his divine spirit. Since this place was so dangerous, he could make use of this opportunity to temper himself. In this way, as long as he made a breakthrough in his cultivation and his spirit became more condensed, he would have more confidence in participating in the medicine banquet and the Tianding Grand Meeting. Wei Wuyan had been carefully observing Chu Li's expression. When he saw that Chu Li had changed from contemplation to determination, he knew that Chu Li had made up his mind. Hence, he stopped persuading Chu Li and only reminded him, the most powerful pressure can produce the most powerful motivation. It can also make the most incredible breakthrough. If you can fight your way out of the black blood forest, it shouldn't be a problem for you to raise your cultivation by a few more levels. However, you have to be careful. Although your cultivation is not weak, there are many experts here. Who knows how many of them are stronger than you? If you are in danger, don't try to be brave. If I can't save you in time, then everything will be bad. Chu Yang looked deeply at the dark mountain pass in the distance. He slowly nodded and said, I know. This place is dangerous. For ordinary people, the mere mention of it makes their faces pale. But for martial arts fanatics, it's a treasured place to gain experience. Every year, there would be young disciples from the various large clans who would come to this place to gain experience and increase their strength. However, they usually didn't dare to go too deep. Usually, they would only walk for a few hundred miles before retreating. Actually, this place isn't just a dangerous place. Wei Wuyan turned his head and looked at Chu Luer meaningfully. He said, Brother Chu, do you know that there are 3 treasures in the southeast region? Boneless fish in 10,000-mile waves, blooming and withering flowers in 1,000-year fog, and black blood vines in the black blood forest. You're saying that there are black blood vines here? Chu Yang suddenly turned around. Wei Wuyan said, Yes. And it's black blood poisonous core vine. There are thousands of poisons on it, and mysterious bone-destroying water on it. However, these 2 things are at the center of the black blood forest, and it's very hard to find. Chu Yang automatically ignored Wei Wuyan's last 2 sentences. He said excitedly, Haha, there's actually black blood poisonous core vine and mysterious bone-destroying water here. This black blood forest is really a good place. Wei Wuyan was speechless. I've said it clearly. It's at the center of the black blood forest, and there are many experts there. That mysterious king of the black blood forest is there. And you're still so excited? Chu Yang couldn't help but be excited. Although the black blood poisonous core vine had a scary name, it wasn't poisonous in itself. The heart juice of the black blood poisonous core vine was an even better treasure. It was something like bone marrow. Once it was refined, it would be the source of thousands of poisons. Although the source wasn't poisonous, if it was given to Chu Luer, her cultivation of poison techniques would be smooth sailing. With the help of great poisons to temper her body, the help of the poisonous core of the human-faced spider, and the inner core of the poisonous flood dragon, she would be able to produce thousands of poisons automatically. With the heart juice of the black blood poisonous core vine, Chu Luer's poison techniques would be like having the source of thousands of poisons. It was equivalent to reaching a higher level. How could Chu Yang not be happy? Mysterious bone-destroying water was an accompanying substance of the black blood poisonous core vine. Only places with mysterious bone-destroying water could the black blood poisonous core vine grow. Both were indispensable, and this mysterious bone-destroying water was even more nourishing for women who cultivated the cold aura. It was said that it could completely incinerate the meridians that weren't suitable for cultivation and reshape them. This was equivalent to a complete rebirth. To the current Chu Luer, each of these 2 items was a great fortune that she could only dream of. And to Chu Yang, these 2 items were also infinitely useful. These were all good things that could be used to make heavy pills. In the tribulation space, although the sword spirit was still weak, he couldn't wait to express his desire. You must get them. You must get them. The sword spirit was roaring somewhat ferociously and jumping up and down in the tribulation space. He couldn't wait to come out and take over Chu Yang's body and kill his way into the black blood forest to obtain the black blood poisonous core vine and mysterious bone-destroying water. The more the better. The more the better. The sword spirit gritted his teeth. Chu Yang originally wanted to just pass through the black blood forest. But when he heard that there were such treasures here, how could he still take another step forward? At the same time, he had a strange plan in his heart. I heard from Wei Wuyan that the people here are all enemies of the big clans. At the very least, they are rebels. If I can get some help from here. If Wei Wuyan knew that Chu Yang actually had this idea now, he would definitely fall down from his horse's back. These people are all extremely vicious and have been entrenched here for countless years. You actually want to get them as your subordinates? They'll eat you alive. Let's go down quickly. Chu Yang laughed. You have to be careful. All treasures aren't easy to get. Wei Wuyan reminded him. Not only are there accompanying ferocious beasts, but that mysterious king also stays here for a long time. Who knows why? You have to be careful about this. Although treasures are good, you have to act according to your capabilities. It's only a treasure if you're alive to enjoy it. If you're not alive to enjoy it, it's just a trap. Chu Yang smiled lightly. Sometimes it has to be in life. No matter whether it's in life or not, you have to try before you know. Who would be willing to take a detour directly? Wei Wuyan sighed. He regretted telling Chu Yang that there was a black blood poisonous core vine here. It was only when he heard Chu Yang and Chu Luo talking about poison that he remembered that there was such a thing here. Therefore, he blurted it out without thinking. He didn't expect Chu Yang to be so eager and daring. Looking at the black blood forest in the distance now, that dense black fog and that pitch-black color, Wei Wuyan suddenly felt that it was like an ancient giant beast with its mouth wide open, waiting for the three of them to jump in so that it could chew them into powder. The three of them looked at the Black Mountain Pass from afar and heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. Then, they waved their horse whips and rushed down, leaving behind a trail of smoke and dust. The Black Mountain Pass was indeed the Black Mountain Pass. Even the rocks on both sides of the mountain were black. The three of them rode past the Black Mountain Pass like a gust of wind and entered the vast area in front. This was also the chaotic world that Wei Wuyan mentioned. This was a boundless forest. Moreover, the trees on both sides were tall and thick. No one knew how old they were, but regardless of whether it was the trunks or the branches, they were all pitch black in color. Even the ground under their feet was pitch black. Even though it was daytime, there was still a dark fog floating in the air. An indescribable gloomy atmosphere arose spontaneously. As the three of them went deeper into this area, this atmosphere became more and more intense. Faintly, a kind of terrifying feeling naturally pervaded the air. It seemed to be full of oppression and blood. Even the sky above seemed to be forever shrouded by a gloomy fog. One couldn't see the blue sky and the sun, and there was a faint murderous intent. The three of them didn't stop at all. They spurred their horses and rushed into the first dense forest. The crisp and rapid sound of horse hooves woke up the silence of the black blood forest. A chaotic sound of birds chirping could be heard. Countless birds of all shapes and sizes flew up from the tree branches and hovered in the air, as if condemning these intruders who had intruded into their territory. Even these birds were all pitch black all over. Looking up, one could only see cold and gloomy gazes. The eyes of these big birds were actually flickering faintly and viciously like willow. The wisps. Chu Yang suddenly discovered a strange thing. After entering this vast area, it seemed that his divine senses and senses of aura had lost their function. It was as if he had entered an undetectable ghost territory that blocked off all auras of living things. Other than faintly feeling that the surroundings were full of malicious gazes, he actually couldn't detect any aura of enemies. Chu Yang was stunned. He reined in the horse and stopped. There's something wrong with this place. Wei Wuyan seemed to have seen through his doubts. He smiled bitterly and said, "This kind of place is like this. Ever since that powerful person folded the heavens, the border areas of the various big clans, which are actually the original folding points, seem to have been placed with restrictions. Even supreme martial artists, if they are below the 5th grade, can't use their divine senses and aura here. Only those who have reached the level of a supreme martial artist and above can use their divine senses to break through such restrictions and achieve the effect of unimpeded movement. Supreme martial artist of the 5th grade. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. These 4 words reminded him of an extremely important matter. This matter made Chu Yang's expression change completely. Chapter 895. From the divine soul of the first tribulation sword master. Chu Yang knew that there was an obvious boundary between the supreme martial artist level, and this boundary was called the boundary between immortals and mortals. Below this boundary were mortals. Above this boundary were immortals. And this boundary was supreme martial artist level. And now, the boundary of this restriction in the Black Blood Forest was actually also supreme martial artist level. How could there be such a coincidence? If it wasn't a coincidence but a deliberate arrangement, then why? The more Chu Yang came into contact with these secrets, the more he felt that the heavens were really full of layers of unsolvable fog. And behind these layers of fog, there was only one truth. Other than that powerful person who could fold the heavens, no one could find out this truth in these thousands of years. Chu Yang muttered, Intermediate Supreme Martial Artist. It actually requires an intermediate Supreme Martial Artist. Wei Wuyan didn't notice his expression. He sighed and said, That's right. Only an intermediate Supreme Martial Artist can break through this restriction, and it's only limited to himself. Although the heavens is extremely vast, how many Supreme Martial Artists above 5th grade have there been since ancient times? Moreover, why would an expert with such a cultivation level have any interest in the Black Blood Forest? Not to mention coming here specifically to break through the restriction. That's pure nonsense. Chu Yang thought for a while and couldn't help but laugh. Which powerful person would be so free as to come here specifically to test whether his divine soul power could break through this worthless restriction? Wei Wuyan said, So this is also the reason why this place can exist until now. Otherwise, this Black Blood Forest would have been swept by the big clans long ago. In the whole continent, there are more than 10 such places, and they form a circle around the whole upper 3 heavens, with the Yi clan in the center. There's actually such a strange place in the world. Chu Yang frowned. Wei Wuyan smiled lightly, and there was some mockery on his ordinary face. Yes, because of the restriction of divine senses, the people in this place are all extremely daring. No matter who they're facing, they dare to draw their swords brazenly, because they don't know and can't tell whether the person they're facing is a martial artist or a 5th grade supreme martial artist. Chu Yang smiled. Fight blindly? If a supreme martial artist really comes in, then wouldn't it be like a group of ants surrounding a group of elephants and attacking recklessly? And they're actually full of confidence to win? How ironic. Wei Wuyan couldn't help but laugh. That's right. At this moment, before Wei Wuyan could finish his sentence, a strange voice that sounded like a crow's caw could be heard. This voice was sometimes far and sometimes close. It was strange and eerie. Along with this voice, the surroundings seemed to be filled with eerie ghostly aura. The laughter was still echoing, and it was getting worse and worse. The 3 of them pretended not to hear him, and continued on their way. Regardless of whether it was Chu Yang's composure or Wei Wuyan's cultivation, they didn't take such a small trick to heart. That gloomy voice finally sounded, carrying an indescribable sense of mockery and ridicule as it said in a strange tone, Oh my, where did this friend come from? How awe-inspiring. How daring. He actually galloped in the Black Blood Forest without any restraint. Isn't he looking down on the fellow cultivators in the Black Blood Forest? Following this voice, a wave of mocking laughter rang out in front of them. From the looks of it, they look like a few fledglings. Ha ha ha. Fledgling. Old third he, don't tell me you want to eat meat again? Heh, don't blame me for being greedy. These 3 pigs really look appetizing. Other than that rigid face, that young one and that little girl are all pink and tender. I'm drooling just looking at them. Ha ha ha. That rigid face must also be very chewy. Old third he, you eat human flesh to replenish your energy. This time, you must be able to replenish your energy again. I hope I can eat them for a few more days. Ha ha ha. Slurp. This person seemed to be drooling as he swallowed a mouthful of saliva. I've been craving for them for a long time. I haven't seen such tender fat sheep for a long time. Just looking at them makes me feel that they're so delicious. I can't take it anymore, I'm drooling. A wave of weird laughter. Chu Yong raised his eyebrows and shouted, "What old third he? Whether you're a human or a ghost, show yourself to me." When he first heard Wei Wuyan's introduction, Chu Yong thought that there must be a few good men in this lawless area. He even had the intention of recruiting them. But at this moment, ever since he heard the words "look appetizing," "little girl is all pink and tender," the king of Hell Chu suddenly had a murderous intent in his heart. Sucking the blood essence of martial artists for one's own cultivation was an extremely evil method of cultivation. This cultivation method was very fast. He basically didn't need to cultivate. He only needed to know how to operate the cultivation method, and then catch a living person to suck their blood essence. After that, he would be able to extract 1/10 of this person's cultivation as his own strength. But there was a restriction here, and that was the person who was sucked must be a living person. Often, after a person's blood essence had been sucked out, he wouldn't die immediately. That kind of scene was really tragic. This kind of cultivation method was cruel and inhumane. It had always been forbidden. He didn't expect that it would be so brazen in this place. This kind of person really couldn't be considered a human. Since this is the case, I have to train anyway. Let this king of hell start from here, and kill my way to the heavens. With this shout, the movement in front suddenly disappeared. Immediately after, there was another commotion. That eccentric voice sounded even more arrogantly. "Scared me to death, scared me to death. It's actually a young master. Ha! Ha ha, old third he. It seems that you're going to worship him as your godfather. You still want to eat meat, haha. Isn't that the same as eating your own father?" With this angry shout, a few figures suddenly appeared in front. The person in front had a face like the bottom of a pot. His nostrils were facing the sky, and his ears were protruding. His hair was sparse, and one couldn't tell how old he was. He grinned hideously and said, "Who's the young master that spoke just now? Come out and let me have a look." Chu Yang's eyes were cold as he looked at these people in front of him. In the gloomy forest, there were many people hiding in the shadows, paying attention to the movements here. 5 people came out in front of him. If these 5 people didn't come out, it would be really hard to discover them. That was because they were all dressed in black. Even their skin was black. Even their eyeballs were almost completely white. Only when they moved would a trace of white appear in their eyeballs. Chu Yang looked over. Just as Wei Wuyan said, he couldn't see the cultivation of the people in front of him. Among the 5 people, the one who spoke just now must be that old third he. Another one was thin and withered. He didn't weigh more than 25 kilograms. He squatted there like a big monkey. His mouth was sharp, and his cheeks were like that of a monkey. He looked at Chu Yang with his eyes shining with a vicious light. Another one was fat and big. He was fat all over, and had a hideous face. Another one was thin and tall, like a hemp stick. His head was actually sharp like the tip of a spear. There wasn't a single hair on his sharp head. It was black and glossy, and there was only a circle of fine hair around his ears. The last one had his back facing Chu Yang and the others, so they couldn't see clearly what he looked like. At this time, that old third he laughed hideously again. He stretched out his blood-red tongue and licked his lips. He looked at Chu Luo greedily and sucked another mouthful of saliva. Then he laughed weirdly and said, "Where's that young master who spoke just now? Your old third he is here. Why aren't you coming out to accept my worship?" Wei Wuyan frowned. For this person to speak like this, he already didn't put his own ancestors in his eyes, not to mention loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. He really had no sense of shame at all. Chu Yang sneered and took a step forward. He said, "Your old third he? I'm the one who spoke just now. However, with your unloved and unloved appearance, if I really have a grandson like you, I'll really jump out from my coffin even if I die." Old third he looked at him sinisterly with his pitch-black eyes. "Young master, since you don't like me, why don't you let me eat you? It'll also be a good thing for you, ha. Look at your tender appearance. You're still a virgin, right? You still have to torment yourself on a woman for a long time before you can give birth to a baby, right? Do you know how to torment yourself? Ha ha ha." Chu Yang smiled slightly. It doesn't matter how I torment myself, but I pity your parents. After tormenting themselves for such a long time, they gave birth to a super bastard like you. It's also a kind of tragedy. I'm just curious about one thing. Old Third He's eyes flickered viciously. He actually tilted his head and made a curious look. What's the matter? I'm just curious why your mother didn't strangle you to death the moment she gave birth to you. Chu Yang curled his lips. You should look better when you're reborn. Old Third He's face turned ugly. Young master, I originally wanted to talk to you for fun, but you actually dared to speak rudely. Chu Yang was unmoved. He said, actually, I'm also sad for your father. Even if I let you stay like that, it's still much better than coming out to discuss people, right? Laughter sounded all around. Even those who were on the same side as Old Third. He actually started to mock him mercilessly. Chu Yang's heart flashed. These people don't have any sense of camaraderie at all. Old Third He roared. But the next moment, a ghastly sword light had already arrived in front of him. Chu Yang had already scolded enough. Why would he continue to talk to such trash? He would kill him first. But he didn't use his full strength for this sword. Killing people wasn't important. What was important was the experience gained during the battle. Besides, the opponent's strength was unknown. If he used his full strength rashly, once he was hit by a strong counterattack, he would definitely be exposed. At that time, if Old Third He's cultivation was high, even Wei Wuyan might not be able to intervene in time to save him. The sword was like a shooting star. Old Third He roared. He suddenly turned his body, tilted his head and dodged the sword. A few strands of sparse hair fell lightly. Old Third He was flustered and exasperated. So small. If I don't eat you alive today. Before he finished his sentence, Chu Yang's sword had already arrived in front of him again. Chapter 896. Old Third He shook his arms and saw-toothed discs appeared in each of his hands. Once he made his move, the discs flew up with loud noises. They turned into two streaks of black light in the air. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. When he made contact with Old Third, Chu Yang realized that this Old Third He's cultivation was extremely impure and chaotic. It seemed that this was the disadvantage of swallowing other people's blood essence. And this Old Third, he was obviously only a 4th or 5th stage martial emperor. With Chu Yang's cultivation, he could totally crush him to death. Presumably, this was only the outermost area of the Black Blood Forest, and there weren't many experts here. Chu Yang's heart was set. But Old Third He's weapon was extremely rare. The way to use such a weapon was also very unorthodox and extremely lethal. So Chu Yang simply suppressed the killing intent in his heart and started to fight with him. Sabers and swords were the ancestors of weapons. Any weapon, no matter how it changed, had something in common with the way of the sword. Old Third He's two saw-toothed discs slashed horizontally, and directly after he made his move. And every time he made his move, there would be a change of turning. No matter if he hit the enemy's weapon or missed, he would always turn his hand back. This made Chu Yang think of a unique killer move of the way of the sword. Sword control technique. He used the fleeting snow cloud steps and the nether phantom steps that came from the first-generation Calamity Sword Master. His figure floated and blurred as he engaged in a fierce battle with Old Third He. At first glance, it seemed that they were evenly matched. But Wei Wuyan, who was watching from the side, already revealed a relieved smile. Up till now, Chu Yang's sword was like the spring breeze, like a dancing willow ever-changing. He didn't use the Calamity Sword technique at all. He didn't even use the sword moves that he created himself. He only used very ordinary sword moves like poking, stabbing, slashing. He used all means to interfere with the other party's moves, and at the same time figure out how to use the other party's vital chi in different situations. The more Old Third He fought, the more ferocious his expression became. He suddenly roared and threw out two discs. Then, he shook his hands and two more saw-toothed discs flew out. The moment he shook his hand, Chu Yang suddenly understood one thing. It turned out that in addition to the circulation of the yuan qi in the body, it also required the wonderful vibration of the wrist. At the moment of the attack, the internal and external forces would circulate simultaneously and form a kind of attractive and circulating aura around the body. the sawtooth disc would naturally come out and return, and come back again. The cycle would repeat endlessly. Chu Yang let out a long laugh. Die! His eyes were cold, and his long sword suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance. With a few popping sounds, the 4 discs flew out in all directions. Surprisingly, they did not return. Old Third He was astonished. He hurriedly retreated and shouted, "How do you know my?" Since Chu Yang had understood the mystery of his circulation of power, he naturally cut off his circulation with his sword. So, how could he allow him to say anything at this moment? With a flash of sword light, it was more than twice as fast as before. Before Old Third He could finish his words, he already felt a chill in his chest. A gust of sword energy had already rushed into his body and pierced his heart. With a popping sound, all his internal organs shattered at the same time. A big bloody hole appeared in front of his chest. Old Third He's body did not fall. He looked at Chu Yang strangely and actually laughed. "You dare to kill me? Haha, my teacher will not let you off." Chu Yang snorted disdainfully. With a flying kick, he sent this infinitely disgusting body flying into the air and breaking it into pieces. Only a head flew far away with the sound of the wind. It flew into the dense forest and disappeared. Even though it had already become a corpse, Chu Yang did not want to see this disgusting face again. So he sent it flying with a kick. However, Chu Yang's method was undoubtedly very cruel. Especially the last kick, which sent the head flying away, made one's hair stand on end. The sound of the corpse falling to the ground was heard. The scene was silent. No one spoke. Chu Luer screamed. She was so scared that her face turned pale. Wei Wuyan took a step forward and wanted to cover her eyes. "Don't cover up. Let her watch." Chu Yang's cold shout came from the field. Wei Wuyan stopped in his tracks. Chu Luer's 2 big eyes looked at the broken body parts on the ground. She was full of fear and her body trembled. Chu Yang did not turn around. "Luer, don't forget your path. Since you've chosen that path, whatever kind of scene you're going to face in your life will not be cut off. If you're scared, change your mind as soon as possible. If you don't regret, then from now on, you have to face the fall of your life by yourself. Face the despair of life and feel the aura of death. Because you'll have to do these things by yourself in the future." Chu Yang said coldly. "If you don't dare to look, then tell me that you regret it." Wei Wuyan stomped his feet and said with some pity, "She's still a child and a girl." Chu Yang's expression did not change. He said coldly, "But her enemies will not let her off just because she's a child or a girl. On the contrary, if she can't accept it now, she'll have to accept it in the future." Wei Wuyan was speechless. "I don't regret it," Chu Luer said with a trembling voice. She tried her best to open her eyes wide and look at this hell-like scene. Her face was pale, and she was on the verge of collapsing. Chu Yang's face was cold and hard, as if he had no pity for his sister at all. Wei Wuyan sighed in his heart. Chu Yang may seem ruthless now, but he's really responsible for his sister. Just like what Chu Yang said, Chu Luer had already chosen her own path. Then, she would have to face all these sooner or later. Timidity was a kind of mentality that could be fatal at any time. Since Chu Luer had decided on her own path, then from this moment on, Chu Yang would use all methods and means to grind away his sister's weakness, timidity, hesitation, fear, and so on. All the mentality that could hurt her in the future. You actually killed Old Third He." That skinny and shriveled guy who was like a baboon screamed. Once he spoke, Chu Yang immediately recognized him. This person was the one who let out a strange laugh when they just came in. "Not only do I want to kill Old Third He, I don't intend to let the few of you off either." Chu Yang said coldly, "Come, hand over your heads." That skinny and shriveled guy's eyes flickered and he suddenly roared. Everyone attacked together. The 4 of them jumped up at the same time. Chu Yang looked around, and his heart couldn't help but settle down. Among the 4 of them, 2 used swords and 1 used a pair of hooks. With a strange curved arc, they flickered with cold light. What surprised Chu Yang the most was the fattest guy. This guy had the largest build, but the weapons he used were 2 long needles. They were half a foot long, and as thick as chopsticks. Both ends were sharp and round in the middle. As he spun them in his hands, balls of light actually spun out and spread out in circles. Chu Yang was very interested, but the four of them had already pounced on him. For a moment, the four of them used 3 kinds of weapons and fiercely greeted Chu Yang at the same time. Chu Luo exclaimed. Wei Wuyan comforted her. It's okay, just watch. He paused for a while and said, in the future, when you start to cultivate, you will see such scenes every day. Your family and friends fighting in front of you and falling into a dangerous or hopeless situation. Such things are really too common. You have to learn to accept it. Otherwise, you won't be able to embark on that path in the end. Chu Luo pursed her lips. She was so worried that her little heart shrank into a ball. She said in a trembling voice, but this is my big brother. Wei Wuyan sighed and thought to himself, why must I not worry about my big brother? This is really a little hard to say. Turning his head to look at the scene, his eyes suddenly lit up. The sword in Chu Yang's hand became as soft as water. The sword in the east and the sword in the west seemed to be slashing against the resistance of the water flow underwater. There was an obvious feeling of sluggishness, but it was this kind of soft move that blocked the attacks of the 4 enemies. It was impenetrable. Moreover, that kind of strange sword momentum seemed to be driving something, which affected the attacks of the 4 enemies. And this effect seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. It was as if the undercurrent of the water was slowly surging. Slowly, it would set off a whirlpool, which would drive the water flow to change its direction and strength. Wei Wuyan had never seen such a sword technique before. He couldn't help but stare at it in a daze for a while. He instinctively felt that Chu Yang's sword technique contained a kind of strange understanding, and this kind of understanding would be of great use to him. Wei Wuyan's face was solemn. He increasingly felt that there were really endless secrets on Chu Yang's body. That day, when he killed those 3 people, the sword techniques he used were fierce and domineering. It wasn't difficult for him to kill people above his level. Moreover, he had never seen such swordsmanship before. But he had a feeling that under such fierce sword techniques, as long as one's cultivation was enough, even the sky could be split into 2. Wei Wuyan wasn't a descendant of a big clan, but a disciple of an itinerant cultivator. Although he knew about the legend of the Tribulation Sword Master, he definitely didn't know about the Tribulation Sword technique. This was also the reason why Chu Yang dared to use the Tribulation Sword technique that day, even though he knew that Wei Wuyan was watching from the side. Now, the sword technique that Chu Yang used to deal with the siege wasn't actually a sword technique, but a sword intent. The power of soft water. Chu Yang comprehended the power of sword techniques in the lower 3 heavens. During this period of time, he hadn't given up on studying it. Finally, today, after his sword techniques had broken through to the 5th stage of Sword Sovereign, he could easily use this set of soft water sword intent. This time, Chu Yang settled down to practice and supplement his sword intent. Currently, there were 2 weapons that he could use as a reference. Hook, needle, double hook and double needle were completely different from using a sword. In fact, they were completely opposite. When the needle danced on the palm, it was needless to say that the force used was small and delicate. On the other hand, the hook was similar to a saber, but the force used was completely opposite. Hooks were used to pull inwards, fling outwards, swipe upwards and pull downwards. These kinds of forces were completely different from using a sword or a saber. But Chu Yang just had to discover the shortcomings of his sword intent from these 2 strange weapons. If hooks could be used, why couldn't swords be used? Hooks were originally evolved from sabers, and sabers and swords were inseparable. Since hooks could be used, then swords could be used too. Chu Yang sensitively realized that although the opponent's strength wasn't very high, as long as he comprehended this layer of sword principles, his sword technique's cultivation would definitely improve by another level immediately. Chapter 897. As Chu Yang talked about the battle, his own understanding also increased. Only then did he realize that his soft water sword intent was definitely not to be underestimated. As the sword momentum unfolded, it actually became more and more powerful, especially during the battle, as the enemy's energy slowly became more and more skillful. Originally, he used this soft water sword intent because he had absolute confidence that he wouldn't be injured, and was also worried that the tribulation sword technique would be recognized. At the beginning it was very embarrassing for a while. But as the sword momentum unfolded, Chu Yang became more and more at ease. Especially when the first gentle sword energy surged out in an arc like an undercurrent in deep water. Chu Yang's heart was suddenly enlightened. This sword intent was comprehended in water. In water, one was completely surrounded by water, just like how he was surrounded by enemies now. It was the same. In such a situation, it was impossible to use violence to break out of the encirclement or win. The only thing he could do was to use the power of the water flow, and use his own strength to guide it. Let the enemy's energy move in the direction of his sword intent, and naturally, he wouldn't be hurt. Chu Yang unfolded his long sword very carefully. Surrounded by the four people, it was like duckweed drifting with the waves. It floated in the storm and rose and fell on the tip of the storm. But no matter how big the storm was, this duckweed wasn't hurt at all. His movements were light, and his sword momentum was slow and gentle. But every time he swung his sword, it would inevitably form a gentle and soft force, cleverly diverting the energy of the enemy's attack to one side. At the beginning of the battle, there were still collisions between weapons, and clanging sounds were incessant. But as the battle became more and more intense, the sounds of weapons colliding actually gradually decreased. In the end, it completely disappeared. Until the end, a strange phenomenon appeared in the battle. Chu Yang lightly pointed his sword to the left. There was clearly a shining weapon in front of him that was about to pierce his body. But he didn't know why that weapon involuntarily changed its direction when he pointed the tip of his sword and pointed to the left at the same time. Chu Yang pointed his sword to the right. So the four people with flushed faces tried their best to control their weapons. But they still couldn't stop themselves from pointing to the right again. Their movements were uniform. It was as if the five of them were performing a group dance. Chu Yang was in the middle, leading the dance. With a swing of his sword and a twist of his buttocks, the four men followed suit and swayed their buttocks. He swung his sword again, and shook his buttocks twice. The four men followed suit and shook their buttocks twice. The scene was extremely comical. Chu Luo even laughed as if she was watching a show. This is so fun. What's going on? Why did they all learn from Big Brother? They are fighting a war. How can they fight a war like this? Wei Wuyan's face and eyes were filled with shock. She did not hear Chu Luo at all. Only an innocent little girl like Chu Luo, who knew nothing about martial arts, would find this scene laughable. However, Wei Wuyan only felt a chill down his spine when he saw this. He had seen the battle clearly from the beginning until now. As soon as the other party made a move, Wei Wuyan could tell. These were four emperor-level experts. Moreover, each of them had their own unique techniques. Two of them were second grade, and the other two were fourth grade. Logically speaking, with such strength and cooperation, it would not be difficult for Chu Yang, who was only a fifth-grade sword sovereign, to escape. However, if he wanted to win and kill them, he would have to pay a price. This was also the case from the beginning of the battle. Under the siege of the other party, Chu Yang was somewhat overwhelmed. His set of sword techniques did not seem to be able to cope with such a siege. Just as Wei Wuyan was feeling anxious, he saw that Chu Yang's situation had changed after one sword move. Others might not think much of that sword move, but what kind of eyesight did Wei Wuyan have? He could clearly see that the power of that sword move had actually changed the direction of the sword move furthest away from Chu Yang. From this moment onwards, Chu Yang's situation began to improve step by step. It could be seen that when Chu Yang was using this set of sword techniques, he was still very inexperienced and unfamiliar with it. However, in such a life-and-death battle, Chu Yang was actually very proficient in it. He was able to use it quickly, counterattack quickly, and check quickly. Then, in such a fast speed, he was able to subtly influence the other party's attack. From the initial fluster to the current situation where he was at ease and without any danger, it only took less than 2 hours. There was no need to worry about the current situation at all. Now the four people were like their feet in the mud. Even if they wanted to escape, it was absolutely impossible. Chu Yang could insert the tip of his sword into the throat of whoever he wanted. This was just a matter of a thought and a turn of the tip of his sword. However, Chu Yang obviously did not want to kill them. Why? Wei Wuyan frowned as he watched Chu Yang's sword move. The next moment, he finally lost his self-control and opened his mouth wide. He saw Chu Yang's sword move. It was an ordinary sword move, but the tip of the sword was slightly lifted up. However, the four people's weapons involuntarily lifted up fiercely at the same time. In the air of nothingness, he leapt upwards. Looking at Chu Yang's sword, one couldn't see the profoundness of this sword move at all. However, from the reactions of the other party's weapons, one could see that this move of Chu Yang's really went against the common sense of martial arts. This was obviously the move of the person who used the double hooks, raising fire to burning heaven. This was a hook technique, not a sword technique. However, Chu Yang used a sword to do it. Not only did he use it, but he also led the four experts who were about the same level as him to lift up involuntarily at the same time. This time, the chests of the four people were all exposed. The eyes of the four people were already completely filled with despair, because Chu Yang only needed to use a light sword move to cut the four of them in half. Now, the four people were already extremely regretful. Why did we have to provoke this little ancestor for no reason? They were really tired of living. At the very least, when old Third he died, everyone could have just dispersed in a hubbub. But they just had to overestimate themselves and want to take revenge. Now, they were directly trapped in the other party's aura. Whatever the other party wanted them to do, they did. If the other party wanted them to raise their heads, they didn't dare to kneel down. If the other party wanted them to castrate themselves, they didn't dare to slit their own throats. Not to mention that their lives and deaths were already in the other party's hands. Even their own actions and limbs didn't listen to them anymore. What kind of strange technique was this? How could this be? The four people wanted to cry. However, in the next moment, the four people really started to cry, because their fantasies suddenly became reality in an instant. However, Chu Yang didn't cut them in half. Instead, he let them go. Then he swung his sword horizontally. The four people involuntarily bent down and pulled their weapons to the side in unison. The person who used the double hooks did so according to the rules, but when the other three did so, it was as if they were fishing in the river, and they were fishing in slow motion. Everyone's faces twitched, and they were sweating profusely. Their eyes were full of fear. Chu Yang pointed his sword downwards. The four people chopped their weapons at their own crotches at the same time. For a moment, the four people screamed at the same time. Their facial muscles twitched and tears flowed from their eyes. They were full of fear and resentment, but the weapons in their hands didn't hesitate. They chopped fiercely at their own crotches. It was like the last curtain call of a group dance. It was the kind of neat and well-trained. With a smacking sound, blood spurted out. For lumps of excrescence fell from the crotches of the four people like ripe persimmons. The four people followed with the same action. Their weapons were still in the posture of stabbing downwards. Their bodies were slightly bent, and their butts were slightly raised. Then, they suddenly raised their heads, opened their mouths and screamed at the sky. Ah! The one who used the sword was better. With a slash of his sword, his manhood fell down neatly. However, the one who used the double hooks and long needles almost tore off their own crotches. What kind of pain was this? No wonder their voices were so loud and clear. They were so high-spirited. Their expressions were also so twisted. Just like what they had imagined just now. They were indeed commanded by the other party in such an unimaginable way. They castrated themselves. Then, Chu Yang did another action. He chuckled and stretched out his palm. With a flick of his little finger, a sword actually began to spin in circles in his palm. In an instant, a large halo of light had already appeared. The sword light crisscrossed and the halo slowly dispersed, causing people to feel a chill all over their bodies. The fatty who used the long needles couldn't help but be dumbfounded, even though he was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Isn't this how I use the long needles? Why is he using the long sword like this? Then Chu Yang shouted, "Kill! Tonic!" The four people shouted and begged for mercy. In their panic, they actually shouted "Don't" as tonic in unison. Hearing this, Chu Yang was stunned for a moment. He thought, is this a unique dialect here? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, The rotating long sword in his palm had already stabbed and retracted quickly. It stabbed and retracted again. It was exactly the same as how the fatty used the long needles to attack. Puff, 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 puff. The four people raised their necks and screamed miserably. This posture was really too convenient. The voices of the four people stopped abruptly. A small red dot appeared on everyone's neck, as if they were pricked by a needle. The four people looked at him in a daze. Their eyes slowly turned gray. With a few clangs, the weapons in their hands fell to the ground. Then they slowly fell to the ground. They lost their breath. Chu Yang turned the long sword into a pinwheel in his hand. He stood with the sword in his hand and turned his head to look at the shadows around him. Rustling sounds could be heard from the shadows. The people who were originally hiding in the forest disappeared one by one. Under such unimaginable swordsmanship, these people who originally didn't dare to show their faces didn't dare to stay here at this moment. Wei Wuyan strode forward and looked at Chu Yang in shock and disbelief. You're actually learning the other party's martial techniques while fighting? Wei Wuyan's voice sounded as if he had seen a demon. Chu Yang said in astonishment. Yes, what's wrong with that? Wei Wuyan was speechless. Looking at the innocent expression on this guy's face, Wei Wuyan almost wanted to strangle him to death. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that? How can you say such a thing? Chapter 898. What's wrong with that? Wei Wuyan said speechlessly. Don't you know that you're simply defying the natural order? What do you mean? Chu Yang frowned. He had always been doing this. He didn't feel that he was defying the natural order at all. Wei Wuyan sighed. I'm not surprised by your sword moves, nor am I surprised that you can defeat them, nor am I surprised by your fighting style. I'm just talking about the strength of your heart. The strength of my heart. Chu Yang repeated his words. Because you weren't single-minded just now. You weren't multitasking. Wei Wuyan said. You're wholeheartedly fighting and comprehending your swordsmanship at the same time. But at the same time, you're also wholeheartedly learning your opponent's moves. Wei Wuyan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Do you understand what I mean? Chu Yang was a little puzzled. Isn't this multitasking? What's wrong with that? That's what I was doing just now. Wei Wuyan said frantically. How is this multitasking? This isn't multitasking. This is multitasking. Chu Yang was stunned. How can I have so many hearts? Wei Wuyan turned around and said. Did you feel very detached just now? Other than that, you couldn't feel anything else at all? These three things were going on in your heart at the same time, without disturbing each other? And did you feel that you made a breakthrough at the same time? Chu Yang frowned and recalled the mood just now, but he realized that he couldn't enter it. He pondered and said, Yes, it's like this. This isn't multitasking. This is the Tao state. Wei Wuyan sighed. His eyes were filled with disappointment and envy. The Tao realm is the highest spiritual realm in the process of martial arts cultivation. Once you enter this realm, no matter what kind of martial arts problem you have, you can solve it easily. And this realm can only be encountered by chance. Generally, it can only appear once or twice in a fierce battle, where the mind can't be distracted. It's illusory and unpredictable, and there's no certainty. Tao state. Chu Yang pondered and said. So this is the Tao state? Wei Wuyan said with some regret. In the battle just now, you really should have dragged on for more time. The longer you stay in that state, the greater your harvest will be. Generally, such a situation would only happen once in 1,000 battles after reaching the saint level. Some Supreme Being experts might not even be able to enter such a Tao realm in their entire lives. You are only an Emperor-level expert, but you were able to enter such a Tao realm and ended the battle so easily. You gave up on such a Tao realm. What a pity. Chu Yang said in annoyance. I didn't know this before. Wei Wuyan comforted him. It's already very good. This time, the appearance of the Tao realm allowed you to completely master that strange sword technique of yours. It also allowed you to secretly learn 2 unique skills. With such a harvest, you can be considered to have returned from a rewarding journey. Chu Luo finally ran up to him. Big brother, you were so impressive just now. The little girl's face was still somewhat pale. It was clear that she hadn't gotten over her fear yet. The first thing she did when she ran over was to pull Chu Yang's sleeve. Chu Yang frowned. He patted her shoulder and didn't say anything. Now, no matter if he comforted her or anything else, it wouldn't do Chu Luo any good. She had to go through this kind of temperament training by herself. Chu Luo's eyes were a little bitter. Of course, this little girl was looking forward to her brother's comfort. Wei Wuyan couldn't bear to see her like this. He wanted to comfort her, but was stopped by Chu Yang's eyes. "Let's continue forward," said Chu Yang. "Aren't we going to bury these corpses?" Chu Luo asked with some pity. "Someone will bury them for them," said Chu Yang lightly. He looked up at the increasing number of strange black birds in the sky. In the sky, as the smell of blood spread from the ground, the black and ferocious strange birds had already gathered in a dense mass. The three of them hadn't walked far when they heard a cha-cha-cha sound behind them. When she turned back to look, Chu Luo started vomiting on the spot. She finally understood what Chu Yang meant when he said that there would be people who would bury them for them. It turned out that being eaten into a bird's stomach was also called being buried. The strange black birds in the sky swooped down and ferociously pounced on the corpses on the ground. The cha-cha sound was soft, but it made one's scalp tingle. The corpses of the 5 people, together with their bones and flesh, were reducing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, the ground was completely clean, leaving only a patch of brown ground spots. Even the small pieces of flesh, bones, hair and clothes were all gone. The most terrifying thing was that the skull, which was the hardest part of the human body, was first cut into pieces by the sharp beaks of these strange black birds, and then swallowed into their stomachs. Chu Yang and Wei Wuyan were expressionless. They seemed to have expected this, but also seemed to be used to it. After Chu Luo finished vomiting, she followed the two of them weakly. After walking for dozens of steps, she turned back and saw that the things she vomited were all gone. The three of them gradually went deeper into the black blood forest. The deeper they went, the darker it became. It was quiet all around. Even the sound of birds couldn't be heard. Chu Yang suddenly thought of something. He frowned and said, "Brother Wei, the beaks of these birds are very hard." Wei Wuyan said, "Oh," Chu Yang said seriously. But after they pecked at it, the black ground didn't move at all. Wei Wuyan laughed. "So this is what you're talking about." He suddenly exerted force and stomped down. With a boom, the whole black blood forest seemed to tremble. But the ground under his feet only sank slightly. Do you see it? Because this black blood forest is the original folding point, the soil here is the hardest. It's several times harder than ordinary steel. So the trees in this black blood forest generally grow very slowly, and their hardness is comparable to steel, or even better. Wei Wuyan split open a small tree that was as thick as the mouth of a bowl. He pointed at the grain and said, "Look." Chu Yang looked over and saw that the grain on the tree was densely packed. He didn't know how many circles there were. A tree like this that is as thick as the mouth of a bowl can only grow for 10 years outside. Trees that grow easily can even grow to this size in 2 years. But in this black blood forest, it needs to grow for at least 500 years. Wei Wuyan said. Chu Yang lightly grunted. He thought to himself, "So, the black blood poisonous core vine in here is at least 10,000 years old? If that's really the case, then it's really great." The three of them walked all the way in. Chu Luo was weak from vomiting. She walked at the back unsteadily. But not only did Chu Yang not help her, he also didn't let Wei Wuyan help her. Chu Luo frowned stubbornly and walked forward step by step. The little girl felt that her hip bone was sore, and her feet were also burning with pain. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she couldn't help but sob. Wei Wuyan sighed. "Let me carry you, okay?" "No," Chu Yang said lightly. "You can't even walk a few steps. How can you talk about breaking through?" Chu Yang's face was cold. Chu Luo tilted her head to one side in a fit of pique. "I can walk by myself." "If you can walk, then walk by yourself," Chu Yang said without any pity. The little girl felt even more wronged. She was so angry that she actually quickened her pace in one go. There was a hint of satisfaction in Chu Yang's eyes. Chu Luo's physical strength had already reached its limit just now. But in a fit of pique, she had unknowingly broken through the limit of her physical strength. But with her physique that had never cultivated before, He couldn't let her continue to break through the next limit. That would seriously damage her body. So when she couldn't take it anymore, he had to carry her on his back. Along the way, there was no obstruction at all. It was as if the previous obstruction didn't happen at all. After walking slowly for more than 10 miles, there were movements in front of them again. There were figures in the bushes. More people were coming, but these people didn't show up at all. As they walked forward, the figures in the shadows followed them on both sides like bodyguards. They didn't show up, nor did they retreat. This made the three of them a little annoyed. After walking for a while, Chuyang finally couldn't take it anymore. He let out a long roar and sword aura burst out from his body. He had already used the cultivation of a second stage, Sword Sovereign, and flew into the bushes on the left. Didn't you guys just want to test my cultivation before making a plan? Then I'll give you guys an answer. Wei Wuyan immediately stood still and protected Chu Lure. Chu Yang's sword light was as sharp as a dragon. Once it shot into the bushes, there were screams and blood spurting out. With a flash of sword light, Chu Yang killed his way out of the bushes on the left like a god of death. With sword light surrounding him, he was like a god of death that never tired. With blood and murderous aura all over his body, he entered the bushes on the right again. There were screams again. Chu Yang chased after them with his sword, and swept through the bushes in front of him. Along the way, the smell of blood filled the air. With the sound of flapping wings, those big birds came over. The three of them walked forward. Chu Yang led the way with a murderous aura. Wei Wuyan smiled in his heart and followed quietly. This Chu Yang's scheming was indeed not to be underestimated. First, he let them follow him. Later on, he showed that he couldn't control himself. Anyone who saw him would think that he used his real martial arts in a fit of frustration and anger. But who could tell that this was a trap? Or rather, this was a bait. If he only revealed the cultivation of a second stage Sword Sovereign, then the one who came to deal with Chu Yang would definitely not be a super expert. At most, it would be a monarch-level expert. Then, Chu Yang could calmly practice his sword techniques again. Even Wei Wuyan wouldn't be able to tell that Chu Yang was just pretending if he didn't know about it beforehand. Indeed, after a moment of silence, a gloomy voice said, "I was wondering who was so daring to kill our men. It turns out to be a young genius swordsman, the Sword Emperor of a generation." Chu Yang sneered. "My people? Which branch are you from?" The shadow was silent again. After a long while, that voice said slowly, "You don't need to know which branch I'm from. Little one, you only need to know that it's a piece of cake for me to kill you, a Sword Sovereign." Before the voice died away, a black shadow suddenly fell from above with a violent gust of wind. A black light flew towards Chu Yang's forehead as fast as lightning. In this dark and gloomy black blood forest, such an attack was actually like a ghost. Chapter 899. Chu Yang snorted and thought in his heart, "A mere martial emperor." Straightening his body, he charged forward, his long sword carrying a cold glint as it suddenly struck out, colliding head-on with the black light. Chu Yang tilted his body and retreated 3 steps diagonally. Even he himself didn't realize that his mentality had quietly changed. When Chu Yang was in the lower 3 heavens, his heart would suddenly tremble when he saw a martial king. A martial king. When Chu Yang was in the lower 3 heavens, his pupils would suddenly light up when he faced a martial emperor. A martial emperor. But now, Chu Yang was only a 5th grade Sword Sovereign. When he was facing a sneak attack from a martial emperor, he actually thought, a mere martial emperor. I really don't know how the word mere popped up in King of Hell Chu's mind. That person suddenly somersaulted in the air upon contact. The next moment, he was already following Chu Yang like a shadow. He said eerily, "A second stage Sword Sovereign is nothing more than this." Chu Yang's long sword was like the wind. He repeatedly stabbed and clashed with the opponent's weapon hundreds of times. His feet didn't falter at all. Only then did he realize that the black light in this person's hand was actually a long and narrow saber. This person should have been following them secretly for a long time. He wasn't sure of their cultivation, and didn't attack until Chu Yang suddenly showed his cultivation. He only dared to show himself when he felt confident. Speaking of which, this person was quite careful in his actions. But the words branch master from the opponent's mouth made Chu Yang interested. Could it be that this black blood forest is actually filled with gangs? He's actually a branch master. I wonder which gang he's a branch master of? But when Chu Yang saw that a person with such cultivation actually became a branch master of this gang, he was half relieved. The position of a branch master wasn't very high, but it was still a high-level cadre. Generally speaking, above the branch master was the hall master. Above the hall master were the elders, guardians, and so on. Then there was the branch master. Branch masters were martial emperors. Then, no matter how powerful this branch master was, he was only a first or second stage martial saint. With such cultivation, Wei Wuyan could totally deal with him easily. Chu Yang was relieved. He originally wanted to spend more time with the opponent, so that he could comprehend his own state. But when he saw that the opponent was actually using a long saber, Chu Yang lost some interest. The rotation of the long sword suddenly slowed down. The state of unceasing water flow once again emanated from his hand. A gentle twisting force spread out in the air. Wei Wuyan was watching the battle from the side. His eyes flashed as he thought to himself, "This weird sword technique is starting again." The two of them fought fiercely. But after a while, the battle slowed down under Chu Yang's control. It was like a deep and calm river. Although it was flowing majestically, there were no waves on the surface. It was not as intense as before. As Wei Wuyan watched, he felt that something was wrong. Because Chu Yang's sword became slower and slower. Slowly, it seemed to have entered a realm that made Wei Wuyan envious. Dao realm. The Dao realm actually appeared again. Moreover, as Chu Yang's sword moves became smoother and smoother, that kind of Dao state became deeper and deeper. Wei Wuyan looked at Chu Yang dumbfounded. He couldn't help but want to cry. This kind of Dao state only appeared once when he was besieged after breaking through to the 7th stage of the martial saint level. It was that enlightenment that allowed his spiritual cultivation to reach the peak of the 7th stage of the martial saint level. Before that, he also integrated all the martial arts principles. Therefore, he was able to break through to the 8th stage of the martial saint level within 5 years, creating a cultivation legend. Since then, he couldn't enter that kind of state no matter how hard he tried. But Wei Wuyan was already very satisfied. He knew how rare that kind of Dao realm was. It was already a great blessing for him to be able to get it once. But at this moment, Wei Wuyan saw with his own eyes that Chu Yang actually entered that kind of Dao realm in 2 consecutive battles, in less than 4 hours. He was too speechless. This was a Dao realm that could only be encountered by chance. You can't treat it as a meal. So when he saw that Chu Yang actually pierced the throat of the man in black without hesitation after gaining the upper hand, Wei Wuyan's whole body twitched. What was called recklessly wasting natural resources? That was it. This was absolutely an unforgivable recklessly wasting natural resources. In the previous battle, it was still acceptable if you didn't know that this was the Dao realm. But now that you already know, it was too inexcusable. How can you waste good things like this? This was simply intolerable. After all, when I, Old Wei, found out that I've entered the Dao realm, the battle that should have ended in half a day actually dragged on for 3 days. I only ended the battle when I was certain that the lingering aura had completely disappeared, and I was certain that it wouldn't come back anymore. Now, after Chu Yang found out that he had entered the Dao realm, he actually finished off the enemy so cleanly with a sword. Brother, it's shameful to waste things. Chu Yang sheathed his sword. When he turned his head, he saw Wei Wuyan's weird expression. His face was distorted. One of his eyes was bigger than the other. He was looking at Chu Yang weirdly. The corners of his eyes were twitching. His 2 hands were stretched forward and his teeth were clenched. It seemed that he wanted to rush up and beat Chu Yang up. King of Hell Chu was stunned. Old Wei, what's wrong with you? Are you possessed? It didn't matter if he didn't ask. Now that he asked, Wei Wuyan finally exploded. He stepped forward, pointed at Chu Yang's nose and scolded. What's wrong with me? I'm possessed. Bullshit. You're the one who's possessed. You're a bastard who wastes things. You, how can you be so wasteful? Wei Wuyan's expression was as if he was indignant that his most precious thing was thrown away like trash. What's wrong again? Chu Yang was extremely puzzled. He stretched out his hand, wanting to touch Wei Wuyan's forehead to see if this guy was possessed and had a fever. But Wei Wuyan slapped his hand hard to one side. I don't have a fever. Then what nonsense are you talking about? Chu Yang said discontentedly. Wei Wuyan was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. He said with a hideous face, You. Do you know that you've entered the Dao realm again? I know. Chu Yang's answer made Wei Wuyan speechless. It's precisely because I know. I should have finished him off quickly, but I dragged on for more than 10 moves. Dragged on for more than 10 moves. Wei Wuyan felt that he was really going to vomit blood. Once you've entered the Dao realm, you can fight for as long as you can, idiot. Is it so easy to enter this realm? Wei Wuyan said helplessly. Chu Yang was embarrassed. You bastard. I really don't know why the heavens would give you such a rare opportunity. Wei Wuyan panted heavily. You must remember my ancestor in this realm. Even if you stay in it for a blink of an eye, it'll be of great benefit. Sai, forget it. You probably won't have many chances to enter this realm in the future. Sai, who would enter the Dao realm every day? Wei Wuyan sighed and glared at Chu Yang. He turned around and sulked as he carried Chu Lu'er on his back. He said dispiritedly, Let's go. Why aren't you walking here like a fool? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and had no choice but to follow him inside. Along the way, Wei Wuyan still felt that it was a pity. He kept sighing and talking about, if I enter this realm, I'll do so and so, unlike you, and so on and so on, he scolded angrily. Chu Yang scratched his head and was a little puzzled. Is it really very difficult? Why do I feel that it's very easy to enter this realm? Looking at Wei Wuyan's back, Chu Yang wisely chose not to tell him. Otherwise, this guy would definitely not be able to take it, and would think that Chu Yang was boasting. Then, he would beat up this great benefactor who had saved his life, and given him a new lease of life. Chu Yang felt that with Wei Wuyan's current mental state, it was totally possible for him to do this. Along the way, they went through 2 more battles. But these 2 battles were just harassment. Chu Yang directly wiped them out. Slowly, they went deep into the Black Blood Forest, and were already close to 100 miles away. It was obvious that the sky was already dark. Chu Yang and Wei Wuyan discussed for a while, and pitched the tent. Wei Wuyan ignored him. Obviously, he was feeling extremely uncomfortable. Chu Yang had to do it himself. He leaned against a big tree, and pitched the tent. Wei Wuyan looked on coldly. He was still angry and didn't help at all. Chu Yang also ignored him, and pitched the tent. After he came back with some wild game, he drank some wine and ate until he was full. Then he went into the tent with Chu Lu'er and said, Old Wei, I've been fighting for a whole day and I'm very tired. You have to keep watch tonight. It's been hard on you. Lu'er and I will go to sleep first. Wei Wuyan was instantly furious. What do you mean by you've been fighting for a whole day, and you're very tired? If you didn't stop me from fighting, would I still need to fight for a whole day with that bunch of bastards? Now, you're actually using this as an excuse to treat me as the night watchman, while you hug your sister to sleep. Wei Wuyan wanted to go forward and argue with him, but he saw Chu Yang sticking his head out of the tent again. Oh yes, Lu'er is with me. Don't worry. You just need to keep watch. Wei Wuyan looked at him with a red face. He was so angry that he couldn't say anything. Your own sister is with you. What's there for me to be worried about? Just as he was about to speak, he saw Chu Yang smiling and retracting his head back. Chu Lu'er's voice came from inside. Big brother, can Elder Wei take it? It's okay, Chu Yang said casually. He's used to it. Wei Wuyan roared silently. You're the one who's used to it. Fuck, you're the one who's used to it. Who doesn't want to have a good sleep? Just as he was about to fly into a rage, there was no sound from inside. Great Bloodpayer Wei's curses were stuck in his throat. He almost fell sick from holding it in. He thought to himself, if it weren't for Lu'er, I would have taught you a lesson tonight. As everyone knew, the night was the most chaotic time in the Black Blood Forest. Wei Wuyan was depressed and angry. He didn't have a peaceful night. Guaranteed second update. Monthly votes. Chapter 900. This night, the experts of the Black Blood Forest moved out frequently and attacked from advantageous terrains. Wei Wuyan gloomily fought alone for a whole night. He vented all his resentment and depression on these insensible guys. He didn't know how many people he had killed in this night. Wei Wuyan sighed. What a loss. Many of them were famous figures on the bloodpayers' bounty list. Even the worst of them could be exchanged for thousands of purple crystals. This was especially true for the faction leader, who was a first-stage martial saint. The price was even higher. Now, he had to go deep into the black blood forest to get medicine with this bastard. He wouldn't be able to get out for half a month. The heads would rot. It was equivalent to thousands of purple crystals growing wings and flying away. Wei Wuyan fought for a whole night. In the tent, Chu Yang's rhythmic snoring also sounded for a whole night. He wasn't worried at all, and didn't come out to take a look. Why didn't he wake this guy up? At dawn, Wei Wuyan looked at the hundreds of corpses lying around. He leaned on his sword and sighed to the sky. Damn! The next morning, King of Hell Chu came out of the tent and exclaimed, You're too cruel. You killed so many people. Wei Wuyan looked up at the sky speechlessly. You think I'm so willing to kill people? Damn! Have you figured it out? Chu Yang smiled. Which gang in the Black Blood Forest belongs to? Wei Wuyan said angrily. This is a gang at the periphery of the Black Blood Forest. It's called the Black Tiger Gang. It's very old-fashioned. Their boss's name is Yin Heihu, which is a bullshit name. We've already killed all of them. Chu Yang said lightly. I just want to know how many gangs there are here. Definitely a lot. Wei Wuyan sighed. And the deeper we go, the harder it is to deal with them. There's basically no more gangs when we're about 1,800 miles deep. That's the heart zone. We've only walked for 200 miles now. Chu Yang frowned and said, The gang we've met is already a first-stage martial saint. Wei Wuyan nodded. He was about to sigh when he suddenly became furious. So you heard everything last night. Chu Yang smiled and touched his chin, saying, I can't come out. Luo will be scared inside if I come out. Wei Wuyan was speechless. Following Chu Yang's suggestion, the three of them quickened their pace. Wei Wuyan carried Chu Luo on his back and sped along. Before the people of the Black Blood Forest could even react, they had already advanced another 400 miles. In this area, day and night were basically blurry. However, what made the two of them feel strange was that when they arrived at this place, the people they met actually avoided them, and even made way for them from afar. It was as if he was afraid of provoking them. This made Wei Wuyan and Chu Yang very surprised. These guys are definitely not people who are afraid of trouble. Moreover, the deeper they went, the more experts there were. Why were they avoiding the two of them like snakes and scorpions when they saw them? In this place, all auras were blocked. The two of them did not have such a deterrent effect at all. The two of them were puzzled, but they could only continue forward. However, even though he was puzzled, Chu Yang still made a lot of money when he was supposed to. Moreover, the speed of Chu Yang's wealth made Wei Wuyan dumbfounded. Often, when they were walking, Chu Yang would suddenly jump into the bushes, squat down and dig something with his sword. Wei Wuyan went over to take a look and was stunned, a stalk of ginseng. After walking for a while, Chu Yang jumped into the roadside again. Wei Wuyan went over to take a look, a stalk of blood essence. One must know that the quality of elixirs in the Black Blood Forest was much higher than those in the outside world. The ground here was as hard as steel. If elixirs wanted to take root and grow here, they would need hundreds of times more energy and spiritual energy than those in the outside world. Therefore, elixirs were rare here. But as long as there were elixirs, their effects would be extraordinary. The effect of a 10-year-old ginseng here was comparable to that of a 1,000-year-old spiritual ginseng outside. Moreover, there were quite a lot of people here. Everyone was experienced in the martial world. Which one of them didn't know about elixirs? Since these people came down from the first floor, they must be very secretive. Since they were secretive, they must be quite old. Therefore, Chu Yang's gains were so huge that he was grinning from ear to ear. Take the 30 to 40 stalks of elixirs that Chu Yang collected in just half a day as an example. Every stalk of elixir could cause a sensation in the outside world. The 50-year-old ginseng that Chu Yang collected at the beginning was only as thick as a chopstick. Its whole body was black and crystal clear. According to Wei Wuyan's estimation, This one stock of elixir definitely wouldn't cost 1,000 purple crystals outside. And among Chu Yang's gains, this one was the worst. The only thing that Wei Wuyan couldn't understand was, how did Chu Yang discover it? Even if it wasn't pitch black here, it was close enough. All the flowers, plants and trees were black. There was no other color at all. Even the roots of the ginseng were black. The weeds were at least several feet high. Even if Chu Yang had eagle eyes, he definitely wouldn't be able to recognize it. Not to mention that he discovered it while he was running. This was even more unimaginable. Wei Wuyan stared at Chu Yang's actions with his eyes wide open. The two of them walked forward at lightning speed. But the next moment, Chu Yang turned a corner with a schwa sound and arrived at a large forest. He dug beside a large rock behind a big tree. Then, he threw out the big black rock with a bang sound. Underneath, there was a stalk of black elixir. Good stuff, a 2,000-year-old black blood ginseng. Chu Yang's eyes lit up and he drooled. How many years is 2,000 years in the outside world? Haha, I'm really rich now. Now, in Chu Yang's eyes, the black blood forest had become a huge treasure trove. Although elixirs were rare here, and could only be found in the most secret of places after walking very far, every stalk of elixir was of good quality. Moreover, every elixir in the black blood forest couldn't be found in the outside world. It wasn't that such species didn't exist, but because of their color and effects. The elixirs in the black blood forest were absolutely unique. Seeing that Chu Yang was busy, Wei Wuyan stood still. Finally, he took this opportunity to ask humbly, Chu Yang, how did you discover these elixirs? Chu Yang rolled his eyes. Wei Wuyan hurriedly said, don't use words like good eyesight to brush me off. This is under the big rock, and there are several turns. I don't believe that you can see it. Chu Yang was stunned for a moment. He thought, then what should I say? I can't tell you that I'm the Tribulation Sword Master, and there's a sword spirit in my body. He can see everything with a glance. After thinking for a long time, Chu Yang still decided that he couldn't reveal his secret. Looking at Wei Wuyan, Chu Yang said solemnly, Brother Wei, I've told you, but you must keep this a secret for me. Wei Wuyan's heart itched and he said, of course. Chu Yang said, have you noticed my nose? My nose is gifted. As long as there's any elixir within a radius of 100 feet, I can automatically smell it. Minister Chu pointed at his own nose and said in a serious manner. Wei Wuyan looked at Chu Yang's nose suspiciously and clicked his tongue. There's actually such a wonderful nose in the world. I've really never heard of it. The world is so big. There are many things you haven't heard of. Chu Yang snorted and said, otherwise, why do you think my teacher accepted me as a disciple? You should know that I'm a divine doctor, right? Humph, it's all because of my nose. Wei Wuyan suddenly realized. I see. No wonder, no wonder. He nodded repeatedly. As a doctor, it's inevitable to deal with elixirs. It's indeed much more convenient to have such a nose. This nose is much more useful than a dog's nose. Chu Yang was surprised. After a while he said with a black face, your nose is worse than a dog's. Chu Luo burst into laughter. Wei Wuyan snorted. He suddenly remembered that he only saw Chu Yang digging, and didn't see him put it there. With so many elixirs on his back, it was probably as big as a small mountain. Then he thought of something and said, Chu Yang, you actually have a holy treasure for storage? Chu Yang sighed and said, I'm ashamed that you can see through it. Wei Wuyan rolled his eyes and thought, if I can't see through it, then I'm really blind. Chu Yang kept the elixirs. The two of them continued to move forward as usual. Along the way, no one came out to interrogate them, nor did anyone come out to fight them. In fact, there wasn't even anyone who spoke. Wherever the two of them went, there was complete silence. It was still the same even after they had gone 1,200 miles deep. Although Chu Yang was constantly making a fortune, and constantly filling the tribulation space with elixirs, the quality of the elixirs was also getting higher and higher. But he was always on guard in his heart. He had just entered the black blood forest when he was attacked. It didn't make sense for him to go so deep into the forest, as if he was walking on flat ground. There must be something fishy about this. But no matter how Chu Yang racked his brains, he still couldn't figure out what exactly was going on. Brother Wei, why do you think the journey is so peaceful? Chu Yang frowned and said with some uneasiness and dissatisfaction. His original intention was to train his martial skills. Without any battles along the way, wasn't this equivalent to a tour? Damn it, if this was a tour, why would he come to such a gloomy and terrifying place for a tour? I don't know either, Wei Wuyan said. But there must be a reason behind this. It's just that we haven't figured it out yet. Chu Yang rolled his eyes and thought, what nonsense. It's as good as not saying anything at all. Such a situation would only happen during the internal ranking competition of the Black Blood Forest, which is held once every 100 years. But the last competition was only 10 years ago, and it's far from the time of the competition. Another possibility is that an accident has happened in the Black Blood Forest. Wei Wuyan frowned and pondered for a long time, but he still couldn't figure out the reason. Chu Yang frowned and said, now that we've gone 1,200 miles deep into the forest and are about to reach the heart of the forest, no one has stopped us. This is too strange. If it's not a great opportunity, then it's a great danger. Wei Wuyan nodded slowly and said with a heavy face, I think so too. Both of them looked at each other and felt the heaviness in each other's hearts. There was an indescribable pressure. Just at this moment, an idea flashed across Chu Yang's mind. His hair stood on end and he said, Old Wei, in your opinion, could it be? Third update. I still owe you 2 chapters, but I only have slightly more than 2 hours left. I'm going crazy. Chapter 901. Wei Wuyan's face changed and he asked, could it be? As he said this, his face suddenly turned pale. Obviously, Wei Wuyan had also thought of a terrible fact. Chu Yang's eyes flashed and he said, along the way, except for the insignificant obstruction when we just entered the forest, we have actually passed through the Black Blood Forest unimpeded. And Brother Wei, firstly, you didn't expose your identity. Secondly, even if you did, you wouldn't have much deterrence here. So there must be another reason. As Chu Yang said, Wei Wuyan's face became more and more ugly. Chu Yang turned around and looked at Wei Wuyan. Brother Wei, it seems that there's only one person who can do this in the Black Blood Forest. Wei Wuyan swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, yes, there's only one person. His voice became a little dry. If it's really that person, why is he doing this? Chu Yang asked. Wei Wuyan let out a long sigh of relief and said, I don't know either. The two became silent. No matter what, they had already penetrated 1,400 miles. They weren't far from the centrifugal zone. If that person had deliberately let them in, then it would be impossible for them to leave at this moment. No matter what was waiting ahead, the three could only move forward. But their hearts were already a little heavy at this moment. As the three moved forward, Wei Wuyan suddenly realized that Chu Yang, this money grubber, was actually still collecting elixirs. And the frequency was very dense. Basically, he didn't let go of any elixirs that he detected. Sometimes, he even had to take a long detour to collect the elixirs. This made Wei Wuyan very puzzled. You're still in the mood to do this now? Wei Wuyan was very puzzled. Your guess shouldn't be wrong. It must be that person who's waiting to meet us. That person's cultivation is unfathomable. We're definitely not his match. And now it's dangerous to move forward, and it's also dangerous to retreat. At this time, you're actually still collecting elixirs. I'm really convinced by your broad-mindedness. Wei Wuyan shook his head. Where did you get such confidence from? Why are you so open-minded? Chu Yang bent down and carefully put away a sparkling and translucent black blood Ganoderma. He didn't even raise his head as he said, Why can't I put it away now? Is there any difference between now and before? What's the difference between now and before? Wei Wuyan was speechless again. There was no difference between now and before, but you clearly knew that there was a mysterious and ruthless super expert waiting to make trouble for you. Yet, at this moment, you were still calmly picking herbs. If that person had malicious intentions, what use would it be even if you picked 1,000,000 stalks of heavenly treasures and earthly treasures? That won't save your life. While Wei Wuyan was pondering, Chu Yang said lightly, Brother Wei, if it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. No matter what the person in front of us wants to do, we can't avoid it. Therefore, at this time, there was really no need to worry about anything. Because worrying is useless. Wei Wuyan opened his mouth and closed it again. He was right. If the person in front wants to kill me, I won't be able to escape no matter what. So what's wrong with me picking some elixirs at this time? Chu Yang said with a smile. Wei Wuyan was stunned. Although this guy's thoughts were in the same place as his, why was it that they were completely opposite? Chu Yang smiled and said, if that person doesn't want to kill me at all, wouldn't it be profitable for me to collect more elixirs, while there's no one bothering me? Wei Wuyan was stunned. This matter can be thought of like this? Chu Yang laughed and said, in my life, the only creed is to leave no regrets in this life. If I listened to you and didn't pick any elixirs because I was afraid, and that person didn't kill us in the end, wouldn't that be too regrettable? Wei Wuyan was completely speechless. At the same time, he admired Chu Yang in his heart. Although this young man is young, his mentality is much stronger than mine. No wonder he's so young. Not only does he have superb medical skills, but he's also a 5th stage sword sovereign in martial arts. No wonder. With such a mentality, what kind of difficulties can't he overcome? While Wei Wuyan was admiring Chu Yang in his heart, he heard Chu Yang laugh strangely and said, besides, even if he wants to kill me, why should I leave so many heavenly treasures for him? By then, won't he destroy them all with just one slap? If he wants to keep these elixirs after killing me, how can there be such an easy thing? Wei Wuyan almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned red. He pointed at Chu Yang fiercely with one finger, and his face instantly became distorted. He said with some grief and indignation, You. Wei Wuyan almost cried out of shame. This time, he really didn't have the face to see anyone. To think that I thought this little guy was so honorable and noble just now. It turns out that he's actually so vicious. I've really suffered a great loss. The speed of the 3 slowed down even more. Because young Master Chu was using all means to collect elixirs. No matter if they were grown on trees, buried underground, or hidden. They were all collected by this guy. Not only was Wei Wuyan envious, but even the experts from the Black Blood Forest, who were observing the 3 of them in the dark, were also envious. Their eyes were emitting green light like wolves. Damn it! We've been here for so many years. Why didn't we discover so many good things here? How did we discover all of them in such a short time? This time we've really suffered a great loss. Just this afternoon alone, we saw him jumping left and right to dig away at least 100 elixirs. Based on this estimation, this bastard must have pocketed at least 500 elixirs in these few days. He's actually still not satisfied. Everyone gritted their teeth in hatred, especially when they heard this guy say, if that person wants to kill me, I'll destroy them all and not leave them for them even if I die. If I can't get them, no one can get them. Everyone felt as if they had just swallowed a fly. They even had the thought of swallowing it alive. Damn it, they had seen shameless bachelors before, but they had never seen such a bachelor. He's already on his way to the guillotine, and his head is about to fall to the ground, but he's still trying to make others his scapegoat. There's really no limit to shamelessness. While everyone was cursing in their hearts, they saw Chu Yang straighten his body. He frowned and said thoughtfully, this is 1,450 miles. There are actually so many people who want to stop us from going forward. Old Wei, have you noticed that there are so many people around? These people clearly have bad intentions and don't listen to orders. Before Wei Wuyan could answer, a shout was heard from the surrounding dark forest. Dozens of experts immediately scattered like birds and beasts. Damn it, this little guy still can't find anyone to scapegoat for him. If he complains about me in front of the Lord, even if the Lord doesn't believe me, I'm afraid I'll be skinned alive. It's better to stay far away from this god of plagues. Everyone dispersed in a hubbub. Wei Wuyan was startled for a while. Then he raised his thumb and said, you're ruthless. Your voice is even more powerful than that person's prestige. Chu Yang laughed and said, it's really uncomfortable to be followed by these people all the time. It's only right to ask them to get lost. Now that there were no obstructions around him, young Master Chu collected the elixirs even more unscrupulously. His speed and accuracy shocked Wei Wuyan. This guy didn't even move forward or backward. He walked in circles to look for elixirs. As he walked in circles, he said, "There are so many elixirs. Fortunately, I walked in circles. Otherwise, I really didn't know when I'd be able to come back again. Then I'd really regret it." Wei Wuyan was amazed by this guy's shamelessness. This guy actually walked for an entire morning, for a distance of more than 10 miles. All the elixirs within a radius of 100 miles were in his pocket. If Wei Wuyan could enter Chu Yang's tribulation space, he would discover to his surprise that in Chu Yang's tribulation space, there were already piles of such black and crystal clear elixirs piled up like a mountain. Beside this mountain of herbs, there was a sword spirit who was counting the herbs with a face full of satisfaction. As he counted, he muttered to himself, "A great harvest, a great harvest. Ha ha ha. This is so satisfying. Ha ha ha." As he counted and calculated, the sword spirit felt that even if Chu Yang stopped now, he would be able to exchange for whatever he wanted at the medicine banquet of the Zhuge clan with the medicinal herbs that he had now. Even if Chu Yang stopped now, he would still be able to exchange for whatever he wanted at the medicine banquet. And there would still be a lot of surplus. But young Master Chu obviously didn't want to stop here. He was still working hard and tirelessly. Looking at Chu Yang's vigor, Wei Wuyan absolutely believed that this guy's storage space was really too small. If it was big enough, he would store the entire black blood forest, not leaving a single bit of soil. Into it, Wei Wuyan definitely didn't have any doubts about this guess. In the end, Wei Wuyan and Chu Luo leaned against a big tree and took a nap, leaving that bastard to collect elixirs by himself. After walking for another 2 days, they finally advanced another 50 miles. 1,500 miles. Chu Yang's speed of searching for elixirs became even faster and more energetic. On this day, Chu Yang was digging for a stalk of black blood red fruit. This stalk of black blood red fruit was obviously 5,000 years old. It must be known that a stalk of black blood red fruit that had grown for 5,000 years in the black blood forest was absolutely no small matter, especially the vermilion fruit. This vermilion fruit was as thick as an arm. Even its branches were already transparent, and there was a faint light flowing inside. There were 30 to 40 light green fruits growing on it, and they were obviously not ripe yet. But Chu Yang couldn't wait any longer. He had no choice but to dig up the entire vermilion fruit tree and prepare to transplant it. Just as he dug out half of it, a furious voice suddenly said, "It's fine if you dig up other ownerless things, but you actually covet my vermilion fruit tree. I really can't tolerate this. This thing is in a conspicuous place. Who can't see it? You really haven't taken enough advantage of others." Chu Yang acted quickly and pretended to get up to reply. His right hand exerted force secretly and broke the roots on one side of the vermilion fruit tree. With a swoosh, he stuffed it into the tribulation space. Only then did he turn around. He couldn't help but be startled. At the same time, his eyes lit up. He saw a white-robed man standing in front of him with a face full of anger. His nose was already crooked due to his bad behavior just now. But Chu Yang didn't think of this. He only felt strange in his heart. Why does a white-robed man exist in a place like the Black Blood Forest? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.